All right, good morning, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to first welcome you to the Urban Forest Pest Virtual Summit, Day 2. My name is Maria Marlin, and I am the Community Outreach and Environmental Education Specialist with the Washington Invasive Species Council. And in case you didn't join us yesterday, I wanted to really fast go over a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. So firstly, the summit is going to be recorded, and I will be uploading these videos to YouTube, and then we'll be emailing the links out to everyone who's registered on Zoom. So you will receive an email with the recording. As we go through the presentations and you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. And the Q&A is at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. So all speaker questions go there. And the chat really is just for technical difficulties. And let's see, if you lose connection, you really just use the same link to rejoin. Now, if you are seeking credits from the International Society of Arboriculture or the Society of American Foresters, this slide is for you. In order to receive the credits for today, you have to stay the entire time and fill out the survey at the end. Even if you attended yesterday and filled out yesterday's survey, it's a different one today, so please fill it out today. And unfortunately, we don't have credits from WSDA. I will apply for those next time, but we're only offering credits from ISA and SAF. All right, before I introduce our first speaker, I have a quick poll. And this is just going to gauge your knowledge before you listen to the presentations on some certain topics. So let's see, you should see it. I did review the feedback from yesterday. The 3, I'm an expert. You can use the term expert loosely. Like if you're very knowledgeable about a certain topic, then you can put 3. All right, couple more seconds. Oh, we're already doing better than yesterday. 85% participation. Excellent. All right, looks like that will be it. Oh. All right. Thank you. All right, well, I am thrilled to turn it over to Stephanie Helms now. She is the Executive Coordinator for the Washington Invasive Species Council, and she is going to talk to us today about the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook and just give an introduction to the topics of response structures.
Great, thank you so much, Maria. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Looks great.
Awesome, great. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and great to see you all again, and welcome to Day 2 of the Urban Forest Pests Virtual Summit. My name is Stephanie Helms, and I'm the Executive Coordinator of the Washington Invasive Species Council. We have another great line of presentations today, and I'm excited to share the opportunity to talk with you all about where municipalities fit in to the response structure of both invasive pest preparedness and detection through the lens of the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook. If you're attending this summit today, then you are already well aware of the benefits of urban trees and our urban forests, and the interconnectedness to communities and forests beyond city limits. But have you considered what role you would play in preparing for and responding to an invasive pest? Because without intervention, an invasive pest can spread from an urban area where it's most statistically likely to be introduced to the rest of the state and beyond. Some of the communities impacted may not have the same amount of resources available, say, compared to a larger city like Seattle. And once a pest becomes established, it is extremely difficult to eradicate, and control and management costs quickly become expensive and skyrocket. But that response needs to be practiced well beforehand and deployed quickly. When the cheapest and most effective defense, that is prevention, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there, is not effective. Eradication is really the only thing, but unfortunately that has to happen quickly because as you can see at the left side of the graph, there is a very small window where eradication is possible. Since by the time a pest is even noticed, its population has typically been building over the last few years to the point where it's noticeable. This graph shows that as time goes on and as the infested area becomes larger, eradication becomes impossible and we move to containment. Then management costs skyrocket. And if the infestation continues to grow, we have to move towards protecting the resources that are most valuable to us. Containment is no longer even possible, and then we just have to manage the situation. And unfortunately, sometimes there aren't known eradication tools to eradicate a pest after introduction, which justifies why prevention is the best solution. And if prevention fails and is not responded to quickly, impacts and costs exponentially increase. And as you can see here, local governments and property owners bear the brunt of the costs. This is because local governments will typically be the ones to step in and pay for tree removal, replacement, and treatment if a pest is introduced. Additionally, homeowners pay in tree removal and treatment fees if local governments aren't able to assist, which impacts the most marginalized communities the most. Lastly, as I'm sure you've noticed by looking at this graph here, the graph doesn't even cover ecological impacts or impacts to cultural resources. So how do cities respond? Federal and state regulatory authorities are outlined well, which I won't dive into since we're going to hear much more thorough information in 2 upcoming presentations. But do city urban forestry professionals and tree service providers know how to respond and know where they fit into this response structure? Do they know, for example, all the local ordinances that pertain to tree removal and treatment? Or, for example, determine the footprints in terms of where wood waste is taken and how that would interact with the quarantine? How about maybe if integrated pest management or best management practices have been integrated into existing operations? Are urban forestry professionals knowledgeable of signs and symptoms of priority pests? Or have those potential impacts of a pest introduction already been evaluated in terms of how they'll impact day-to-day operations? But if you have scratched your head at any one of these questions, luckily there is an amazing resource called the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook. Knowing the unique relationship between urban forests and pests led the Washington Invasive Species Council and the Washington Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program and other partners to develop the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook, a workbook that is the first of its kind. Any organization, towns, cities, counties, tribal nations, universities, and urban forestry programs are encouraged to become familiar with this playbook. There is a role for everyone, from land managers to volunteers. Everyone has a play that is outlined in this document. Users of this playbook should consider involving a broad range of stakeholders and partners who will ultimately determine the success of planning efforts, pest detection, response, and future management and restoration of the area. This is a step-by-step guide that outlines key actions, questions, and tasks meant to help communities large and small determine their need for pest preparedness and help close that readiness gap. So how does the playbook work? Well, here's a really quick overview. So a playbook is a set of actions with associated tasks to achieve a goal. This also includes key questions that the action will help answer and links to more information. The playbook format was chosen to be an adaptable framework model for users who are at different stages of urban forest pest readiness, and to address the various pests of concern to a community, since all pests can be different and have different impacts. Ultimately, the goal of this playbook is to close a gap in readiness and response capabilities between the community leaders that manage urban forests and state and federal responders. So now you know a little bit how the playbook works, but where do you begin? Well, first you have to identify one or more local playbook leads to coordinate the planning process. The lead should understand the issues and risks of urban forest pests. The lead should also understand and be sure to know the characteristics of high-risk pests. These characteristics can include biology, pathways, vectors of movement, damage, and regulatory status. This will impact how you need to implement the actions in this playbook and who you will need to include in your approach to be successful. So you're ready to take the self-assessment now. And so what exactly is, how does that self-assessment work? So when you're ready, you will see that the self-assessment includes 20 questions that help answer the question, is your community forest pest ready? The 4 sections that are quizzed are Section 1, Understanding Risk, which helps guide using data to identify what trees and natural resources are to be protected and how vulnerable they are. Section 2, Capacity to Report a Response, covers how ready we are to expand our detection efforts, reporting efforts, and ability to act within the capacity of people, programs, and partnerships in our community. Section 3, Ability to Expedite Informed Decision-Making. This section gauges how ready communities are to make decisions related to pest management, as misinformed or slow-paced decision-making greatly diminishes our ability to effectively respond to pest outbreaks and protect our community's trees. And Section 4, Community Support to Expand Your Impact. Because without community support, you could risk poor communication and lack of information that can spread across the system. With urban forest pest outbreaks, it is key that there is a unified management approach and message. So now to see an example, we will look at a screenshot of the self-assessment section for Section 1, Understanding Risk. So, as you can see, each section of the assessment is divided into further subsections. So for understanding risk, we see the first subsection asks questions related to gathering tree data. This is the section that tries to gauge how much information you know about your community's forestry assets. Each question has an affiliated action number, which is a reference to the Urban Forest Pest Playbook. The action will provide additional context for the question. If you can definitively answer yes to the question, check the box and move on to the next question. At the end of each section, you will be adding up all the points to the questions you said yes to. If you answer not sure, you can see the related action number in the playbook for more information before answering. If you answer no, leave everything blank and move on to the next question. So there we go. We can see all the different subsections here. All right, and after you complete the other 3 sections of the self-assessment, you continue to add up all your scores and find the respective benchmarks. Each benchmark will have recommendations for what actions in the playbook if you are interested in improving your score, which we hope you are. So after you complete those 3 sections of the self-assessment, you can see the benchmark recap. And so here we go. So after reviewing the actions you have not yet completed and review the checklist rating its actions to create a schedule for how often you want to revisit your actions. But not all of that needs to be done in a particular priority order. It's just a good way to work through the playbook. So now let's see what the action, as you can see in the top right-hand corner, would look like. In the upper right-hand corner, there will be a green box that has a suggestion for another action to view or complete at the same time. Each action will also have key questions that it will be addressing. The product of completing the action will also be included in that pink box below. A couple paragraphs of background will then also be presented. So there's your key questions. There's also some more information here, and here are your tasks. Then you will have these tasks, which are specific things for you and your team to complete in order to reach the goal for that specific action. So for this one, we are looking at action 1. The first task says to do what I said at the beginning, which is find a lead. Then identify current departments or staff that have the authority to manage areas related to urban forest pests. The third task deals with writing up a contact list that will be mobilized if a pest is detected. And finally, we have a suggestion to prepare relevant job description language so new hires are introduced to your urban forestry program and plan. So while I kind of zipped through the playbook today, I wanted to remind everyone that this is a free resource available on our website. The link is also included in the resources for this virtual summit, but you also have a QR code and a link on this page. There are numerous accompanying resources on the Pest Readiness page, and we encourage you to dive into the playbook, and please feel free to reach out to Department of Natural Resource staff or Washington Invasive Species Council staff if you have any questions at all. In closing, please encourage others from your city to complete the self-assessment. The Pest Readiness, like Playbook, is not defined to one department, and Pest Readiness itself is not defined to one department. We all have a role to play, and we all have work to do, and the Playbook is an excellent resource for you to get started. Remember to be flexible and revisit the self-assessment often, sometimes yearly, sometimes every 6 months, depending on what works best for your city or your community. Because as we all know, things and times change, new pests appear, so it's good to always have a refresher. And I'd like to thank all the partners involved in the development of this project. That is Department of Natural Resources, Urban and Community Forestry Program, U.S. Department of Agriculture and Forest Service, Washington State University, and Seattle Department of Transportation, and many other partners who all made this project possible. And that's it for me today. I hope this presentation provided some direction in the role of municipalities and response structure and preparedness, as well as gave a real brief introduction to the Playbook. My contact information is up here on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions. And remember, we have the Washington Invasive Reporting app available for Android and iOS phones. Please visit our website for more information as well. We are here as a resource. And with that, that concludes my portion of this presentation, and I'll hand it over to Yolanda Inguanzo, Pest Survey Specialist. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see that? Can you hear me?
Yes, looks great.
Okay.
Thanks, Yolanda.
Okay, great. My name is Yolanda Inguanzo. I work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, based out of Tumwater, Washington. And my job is a pest survey specialist. I work very closely with WSDA on some of the survey programs that are funded by USDA. And I'm going to talk today about some response. What happens when a pest is found? And I think the first thing that I'm going to talk about is CAPS, which stands for Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey. That's the program that I mainly work in and work through. It's a funding source that funds a lot of the surveys that are done, and the survey infrastructure that is put in place to conduct surveys. CAPS has a national priority pest list. CAPS funding is kind of limited, and federal funding for pest survey is limited. So there's a big, they prioritize limiting what pests can be surveyed for with this funding. They don't want to survey for pests that are not going to have a high impact. Also, it's very important that there be effective survey methods, and there's resources available to support the survey. CAPS and federal funding is usually not available to survey for pests that are deregulated or that are already established. Even though there might be a pest that, in a particular area, particular state or a region or an area of the state, you might want to survey for a pest. If it has been already established in the US, it probably wouldn't qualify for CAPS funding or other funding sources that the USDA provides. This is the CAPS website, and I encourage you to take a look at it. There's a lot of really good information on pest biologists. There's pest data sheets that have good information, good pictures, information about the pest biology, the survey method, and other sources that you can research. And if you ever want to contact me, I can give this to you later on if you aren't able to capture it right now. This is a picture of the the website. And right here along the top where it says survey, that's where you can find a lot of information about the individual pest species, and the pest data sheets and a lot of other useful information. This is a screenshot of the pest list. I've got it here sorted in alphabetical order. And if you do look at the CAPS website, this is where you would access the information on the pests. And right here in the blue font is a link. If you click on that, you'll get the pest data sheet with a lot of really good information. And again, if you want to contact me later to help you find this information, feel free, because I know it's hard to kind of get it from this presentation like this. Pests are removed from the CAPS list if they have been federally deregulated. So maybe they've already been introduced and established in multiple states. Then they wouldn't qualify for funding anymore. These are some of the surveys that are done in Washington by WSDA with CAPS funding, but also Plant Protection Act funding. And a lot of these surveys have multiple pests bundled into them. That's also another kind of objective, a preference of the CAPS and USDA funding, is that multiple pests be bundled together in a survey, which kind of makes it more efficient. And here I have a list of the Washington Invasive Species Council priority species, which differs quite a bit from the CAPS priority pest list, in that these are, very much important in a regional way, not so much a national way. Some of these pests have already been introduced and established in other states or in other parts of Washington, but still are important for outreach and for public education. And I just have some pictures of some of the WISC, Washington Invasive Species Council pests on the pest list. And you can find this on their website, this information. So survey methods, that's a requirement of the pests that are on the CAPS list, is that they have to have an approved survey method. The survey method has to be effective and doable, not too expensive. And these are the different types of survey methods: visual, soil sample, specimen collection, tissue sample, water sample, and trapping. If the official survey method is used to conduct a survey and there was no pest found using the official survey method, then the state can report negative data, meaning that they looked for it and they didn't find it. And this can be useful for certifying exports or other regulatory issues, if a state can say that they looked for it but didn't find it. Here are some examples of some survey methods. This is an EAB trap. And survey methods are developed by the research branch of PPQ. They do research to see what shape, what lures, what, where in the tree to hang it, what methods are most effective at detecting the pest. Here's another example of a different type of pest trap for a different pest species. Another trap. Some of the survey methods specify also where the trap is hung. For example, this gypsy moth trap takes advantage of the pest biology by putting the trap right on the trunk of the tree. It's another example of a different configuration of a trap for a different species. And another type of trap for a different species. This is a trap for wood-boring insects that takes advantage of the pest kind of looking for a long vertical dark surface like a tree trunk. Excuse me. Some pests require, the survey method requires sampling. This is a survey for nematodes, which requires, the survey method requires sampling, taking soil samples and having those analyzed in the lab. This is a snail on a container. Some of the pests on the pest list, the only survey method is visual survey. And this picture just kind of really demonstrates that sometimes a pest is really hard to detect just by visual survey. So what happens when a plant pest is detected? Some pests are detected, but they're already known to occur. But the first thing that should happen is that the state plant health director would be notified, and on the state side, the counterpart, the lead for the state survey departments would be notified as well. There may be a meeting consisting of program managers involving WSDA, USDA, and the staff and other people who may need to be involved in responding to the pest detection. There may be delimiting surveys if it's determined that that would be the best route to go to see, when a pest is detected, where is the population? Is it just localized in a very small area, or is it kind of more widespread? And there may be some regulatory actions needed, such as stop sales, trace forwards, where a trace forward is where investigations are conducted to see where did it come from, where did the material that is carrying the pest, where did that come from, and where did it go? Sometimes an emergency pest response program might need to be created, and these are the steps. A new or reintroduced pest is discovered and reported. The pest is examined and pre-identified, but then the identification has to be confirmed by a national taxonomic authority. The state departments of agriculture that are involved are all consulted. There may be a new pest response guideline that has already been published, or a new one may need to be created if it's determined that that would be the best route to go. And depending on the urgency, official notifications are made to the National Plant Board cooperators and trading partners, and a delimiting survey may be conducted. Not all new pest detections will require all of these steps to be taken. Some are determined right at the beginning that it's not an very invasive pest, or a significant pest, or a pest that is not already here. And so some of these steps wouldn't really necessarily need to be taken, but these are possibilities of what might happen. The new pest advisory group would evaluate the pest risk and consult with experts, and possibly recommend a course of action if it's determined that the pest is significant. A recommendation may be made based on the delimiting surveys and other data and other recommendations. And these are the possibilities of responses. Take no action if it's determined that there really isn't any need to take an action, because maybe the pest is already well established, or it's not a significant pest. It has a significant effect on anything. Regulate the pest, contain the pest, suppress the pest, or eradicate the pest. If appropriate, a control strategy would need to be selected, and a PPQ deputy administrator would authorize the response to be carried out. It might require an incident command system if it's going to be a large response, like a large trapping survey with regulatory responses. They may need to use the incident command system to sort of organize the response and make it as efficient as possible, and also to help facilitate working with all the different partners, the different local agencies and state agencies that would need to be involved. State departments of agriculture may cooperate, and there may be a unified command. Trace forwards and trace back investigations would be conducted. Field identification procedures would need to be standardized. Data reporting might need to be standardized, so everybody is using the same data collection systems, and the data can be organized. Regulatory actions may be taken. There may be quarantines established. There may be stop sales. if there's going to be, any kind of treatments, there may need to be an environmental assessment and biological assessment to see what effect would the treatments have on the environment and on any endangered species. Treatment may be applied for the required time. Environmental monitoring may be conducted to see what is the effect of the treatment. Pest monitoring surveys may need to be conducted to evaluate the success. And the program may be designed for eradication, containment, or long-term. Here are some examples of different control actions that may be used to control pests. Their sterile male release may be used, pesticide application, parasitoid application, removal of host plant, application of a systemic insecticide application, application of an aerial pesticide, integrated pest management approach, quarantines, public outreach, and then follow-up surveys. Control actions have to comply with the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Endangered Species Act, which requires federal agencies to make sure that any actions that are carried out by federal agencies or using funding provided by the federal government must comply with these environmental regulations. And as I mentioned before, if it's going to turn into a large involved program involving multiple agencies, they may choose to use the Incident Command System. The Incident Command System, or ICS, was created for responding to emergencies and sometimes non-emergency actions. I think it was started by the Forest Service to respond to forest fires in the early 70s. But now ICS is used a lot by federal and state agencies, and it really helps a lot to standardize the response so everybody's on the same page, using the same language, and able to work together more efficiently. Here's a kind of a tree of the incident command system. Usually there's an incident commander. There may be two incident commanders, one federal and one state. And then there's all these subgroups under the incident commander. Not every incident is going to have all of these components, but the nice thing about the incident command system is that it can be scaled up or scaled down. It can be very small, or it can be used for a very large program. Yeah, here I just have a few things that to keep in mind when a person is doing pest survey to prevent from the surveyor actually spreading the pest. Use of disinfectant, use of gloves and changing the gloves between samples, boot covers, disinfect any tools or equipment, label samples carefully, and attempt to sample uninfected areas before moving to the positive areas. Pathway approach to survey. A pathway is just the way that the pest, any pest gets from where it is to where it might go. And thinking about the pathway is a good way to decide how to approach the survey. Solid wood packing material is an example of a pathway that might bring wood-boring insects and other wood pests, tree pests from one place to another. This is just a picture of containers at the Port of Seattle that really illustrates how much wood packing material is coming into our state. Firewood is another pathway where pests can move around. The don'tmovefirewood.org website is a really good resource to educate yourself and educate others. A lot of good information, some materials for children. So I recommend that you take a look at that. This is just an example of how firewood could be spreading pests, not just insects, but also pathogens. Examples of other pathways: fruit, plant material, nursery stock, airline baggage, air cargo, mail, cut flowers, animal feed, tile, yard waste, and household moves. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the PPA 7721, which is intended to be a way to get more funding to the states and local governments besides just CAPS. CAPS funding has been kind of flat throughout the last many years. And so this is a way to access more funding for doing pest surveys, especially the Goal S part of 7721. It has two objectives. Conducting national priority pest surveys, and this is referring back to the CAPS pests that I talked about at the very beginning of the PowerPoint. And the objective 2, targeting multiple high-risk pathways for exotic pest introduction. Goal 1S. I think I just already did that. Okay, Goal 2, domestic inspection, to increase the number of domestic inspection activities at vulnerable points where pests may enter or move in the country. Goal 3, increase identification capacity. Goal 4, safeguard nursery production. Goal 5, outreach and education. Goal 6, enhance mitigation and rapid response. Next, reporting. Any pest surveys that are conducted using federal funding, and that might be CAPS funding or PPA, Plant Protection Act funding, requires, part of the requirement of the funding is that the results of the survey be reported in a national database. Most surveys are reported in the NAPIS database, unless the program manager designates another data repository, and that happens occasionally, but usually NAPIS is the database that all federally funded surveys, the survey data is the repository for that data. Here's an example of a page from the NAPIS website that shows where surveys are conducted. This is how the data is reported and how you can access that data if you wanted to see what surveys were done. And the NAPIS database also feeds into this pest tracker website that has a lot of really good information geared to the general public on different surveys and different pests that are CAPS pests that are targeted. This is the URL for Pest Tracker. If you want to take a look at it, it's got a lot of useful information. And that's all I have. There's my email address. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to contact me.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Yolanda, for your presentations. I believe there's just one question in the chat for Yolanda. Let's see, I'm a master gardener in Snohomish County and wonder if your photos are available for reuse in our education and training sites.
Absolutely, yes. Send me an email. Normally, to be honest, I kind of rushed through this, creating this PowerPoint because I have a lot of things going on right now. Normally on a PowerPoint, I really should put the photo credit. And so just contact me. A lot of the pictures in this PowerPoint were my pictures that I took. But if they weren't, I will send them to you with the photo credit and feel free to use them.
All right. Any other questions for Yolanda or Stephanie? Please put them in the Q&A. And then Yolanda, if you stop sharing your screen, I will share mine because I happen to be next. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. I am the next speaker. In case you joined late, my name is Maria Marlin, and I'm the outreach specialist for the Washington Invasive Species Council. And my presentation is on the Washington Invasives Reporting app. And we like to say, see something, say something. So I'm going to go over reporting, but I also wanted to give you a little introduction to the Washington Invasive Species Council itself, who we are, what we do. So that's going to be number 1. So the Washington Invasive Species Council was founded by the state legislature in 2006 and is tasked with preventing and stopping invasive species of all types. And to do this, what we do is we bring together all the state agencies that have a role to play in invasive species, as well as tribal nations, federal and local agencies, industries, university, and conservation partners. And if you think about it, every organization has a slightly different mission. But what we do is unite everyone, and we look at the big picture and we fill in these individual gaps that organizations can't fill in themselves. And so we kind of like to compare ourselves to a compass because we provide that policy level direction that all members of the council can use related to their own invasive species work, response, and management. So the council has 3 staff. You just heard from Stephanie Helms, who's the executive coordinator. If you attended yesterday, you heard from Jessica LaBelle. She is our invasive species program specialist. And then there's me. And I just wanted to bring up this point that invasive species don't respect administrative boundaries, right? They're not going to be in the United States and just be like, oh, there's the Canadian border, I'm going to stop. No, so this is a global problem. And to successfully prevent invasive species and stop the spread of those that are already here, we each have this responsibility. We all have to work together to address the problem. Because on a very fundamental level, like we know how to stop invasive species, right? But it takes everyone doing their role for there to actually be success. So from the global to the neighborhood scale, all the way down, there's a role for everyone. So the Washington Invasive Species Council has 6 key strategic areas, and that's leadership and coordination, innovation and research, education and outreach, prevention, early detection and rapid response, and eradication, control, and containment. So one of our really big focuses is raising awareness. And awareness comes in all shapes and sizes. So we have campaigns that you can learn about on our website. We have events, we have workshops and symposiums such as this one. We share information on social media, on our website, however we can. And we're also a hub for free educational material. So awareness is really, like I said, a really big goal for us. It's our number 1 goal. And awareness to us means how do we teach someone to recognize a problem through identification of the target or the signs and symptoms which may indicate a problem. And then we have the second goal. And the second goal is teaching people how to say something if they see something. So this message of see something, say something is really woven into our outreach materials that's produced by the council, or even those produced by other organizations in partnership with the council, because we really want to reach everyone in the community. And so we employ a variety of approaches to reach them, including brochures and signage that you can see some examples here on this slide. So aware and cross-trained professionals and members of the public are truly the backbone of finding and reporting invasive species. And this is an excellent example that focuses on insects. So I'm going to walk you through this. Oh, let me get my little laser pointer. Yeah, okay. So since 1990, there have been 70 introduced insects that have been found in Washington. And what researchers did was review each detection and categorized how the species was detected, and then classified each type of reporting party who made the detection. So 28% were detected through targeted trapping by entomologists. And then down here, we have 20% that were detected as bycatch through trapping for target pests. Okay, so if you combine these two, that's 48% that were made by professional entomologists. Now contrast that with 36%, and I get that by adding the 23% here and the 13% here, that were made by the public and reported to state organizations. And then up here we have 16% that were found by non-regulatory biologists, such as fish surveyors or environmental specialists who just simply snapped a photo of an insect they did not recognize. So if you add these three up, that's a total of 52% that were found by first detectors, whether they were public, members of the public, or cross-trained natural resource professionals. So hopefully this example is a call to action to really mobilize your community and your colleagues to help us find and detect invasive species. I'm going to get rid of the laser pointer now. All right, so the premise really is simple. You don't have to be an entomologist, right, or an invasive species biologist to participate in our first detector network, because the majority of our participants are really just everyday people who keep their eyes peeled for invasive species or signs and symptoms that could indicate a problem. And then they report them through the Washington Invasive Species Council app, and this aids in the detection and rapid response. So what we're asking you is to keep an eye out in your yard, in your neighborhood, at work, when you're recreating, and just really be aware and report what you spot, because it's that simple and easy. So prior to about 2015, the council had this reporting app, but it didn't have an educational program to go along with it. So not surprisingly, the app was underutilized because people didn't really know about it. So each organization in Washington with this need for first detectors had their own programming and materials, which focused really on their own mission and priorities. And that makes sense. So what the council did was form the Citizen Science Initiative that was led by agencies and universities that were at the front line in protecting our state from invasive species. So together, the partners and the council developed these harmonized tools, curriculum, messaging, communications that can be shared across all programs. So let's talk about some of these. Now, there are different options for you for reporting an invasive species sighting in Washington. The first one is phone. There are a couple phone numbers that you can actually call. So the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has an emergency aquatic invasive species hotline that you can call if you see an aquatic invasive species. There's also a feral swine hotline, and this is if you are in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and you see a feral swine. Now, fun fact about feral swine. In the state of Washington, any pig outside of captivity is considered feral. So for example, if you are driving through a small town in eastern Washington and you see a little piglet on the side of the road, that is actually considered feral and has to be reported immediately. We take these very seriously, and the United States Department of Agriculture will send someone out to ensure that little piglet is on the other side of the fence where it is contained. All right, that was a little aside. Back to reporting. We have the mobile app, which I will show you in a moment. And then we have a website, and hopefully we'll have time to show you that too, but there's reporting forms on our website too. So the WA Invasive Species mobile app is free, which is great because we all love free things, right? It's easy to use. There will be a video on the next slide that will walk you through it. It's EdMaps powered, and what that means is that your report is going to go to improve this national map. And on the national map are data points of invasive species sightings and reports that have been verified by professionals. So if you're familiar with iNaturalist, it's very familiar to iNaturalist, except EdMaps is just invasive species based. So here's the video. Please hold one moment. I just realized I did not click the little share sound. So I'm going to stop share and then reshare. So sorry about that. All right, hopefully this will work. This is going to be available on our website soon. This is the draft version. There's just a couple things I have to fix on here, but I wanted to show it to everyone just so that you know this resource is available. It's going to walk you through the entirety of our mobile app for reporting.
This video is going to walk you through how to make an invasive species sighting report on the WA Invasives app. First, select the app from the home screen. When you select the app, it's going to open up into our priority invasive species. Now, our app doubles as a field guide, so you can actually scroll through, select the one you are interested in, and read more about it. There's information regarding their characteristics and how to differentiate them from native species. You can also make a report directly from each species page. However, there's another way to make a report. If you go back and select in the upper left-hand corner the menu icon, which has 3 white bars, the menu will pop up. Now, you go to Report a Sighting. You will be brought to a list of invasive species. Scroll through and select the invasive species you would like to report. Now, for this example, I'm going to use spotted jewelweed, which is a noxious weed. However, when I scroll through, I see it is not in J, and it is also not in S. But that's okay, because we provide options for you to still submit sightings if the exact species is not listed. Under U, you will see unknown aquatic animal, unknown aquatic plant, unknown disease, unknown land animal, and unknown land plant. Even if you know the identification of the species you are reporting, if it is not listed, use these options. So for spotted jewelweed, I'm going to select unknown land plant. Next, a map will come up. Now this is important to note. This map is going to have a pin that's going to be dropped exactly where you are. However, potentially, you saw that invasive species somewhere else. So you have to drag and move that pin to where the sighting actually was. So to do that, zoom out, and then you tap and hold the pin. So this is just an example, but let's say I found it over here in this park. I'm gonna move it right there. And then, once you get the location correct, you just tap the box that says sighting location is here. Next, you are provided with an option to upload photos to your sighting. So I'm going to use gallery, choose that picture, and now you are brought to a screen where you enter your name, your email address, and a description. Now for the description, we aren't necessarily looking for a physical characteristic description of the species. Instead, we're looking more for location information. And if someone were to go out and search for your invasive species, where would they find it? So for example, let's say you saw this spotted jewelweed on a trail about half a mile in on the right-hand side. So I would type in this box on XYZ trail about half a mile in on the right. After you are finished with the location information, tap Review Sighting Report. Then review the information on the screen to make sure it is correct. Finally, hit Save. But you're not quite finished. Even though you hit Save, your report is still not submitted. To submit your report, go back to that menu icon in the upper left-hand corner with the 3 white bars. Then hit Report Queue. Once you're in your report queue, in the upper right-hand corner, select Actions, select your report, and then in the bottom, hit Upload. You will know you are successful when you receive an email thanking you for your submission.
All right. I'm telling you, listening to a recording of yourself is a special form of torture. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful though. I just wanted to emphasize again that report queue. We do get emails asking if we've received a report, and if we can't find it, it's usually still because it's in that report queue. So remember to visit your report queue. So, okay, what happens next after you submit a report? You get the email, then what? Well, when you submit a report on our application, there's an immediate notification that is sent to council staff and anybody else within the council who has signed up to receive those notifications. So this could be state, tribal, federal agencies, local agencies, university partners. Everyone's going to get an immediate notification if they have signed up for one. And then professionals review and verify, and the response really depends on several things. It depends on the lead agency, the species. For example, Scotch broom's widely distributed in Western Washington. The response is going to look different for Scotch broom versus the spotted lanternfly, as well as the area of report and the distribution of that invasive species within that area. And a great example of this, again, is Scotch broom. So Scotch broom is not actually established in Eastern Washington. So if there's a report of Scotch broom in Eastern Washington, then potentially someone's going to go out and take care of it, spray it or remove it. But again, it's so well established here that the response will definitely be to talk with the landowner about Scotch broom management, how to remove it, etc. Okay, let's see. So I still have some time. I'm going to talk quickly about a case study that the council was involved with and trying to emphasize why reports matter. So this has to do with the Tree of Heaven, which we heard about yesterday. It is very special to the spotted lanternfly, and unfortunately is here in Washington. So in 2018, you saw both of these maps yesterday if you attended, but I just want to review a few things. This was the distribution of Tree of Heaven in Washington in 2018. So let's look at a few things here. We have many counties in white, and white means no known infestation. And then these slash mark counties mean, yeah, it's present, but we don't really know the distribution or the extent. So, okay, that's problematic. And then even more problematic is this map on the right-hand side that shows that there's a good chunk of Washington that is, fairly suitable for the spotted lanternfly. So we decided that we wanted to know more about the Tree of Heaven and its distribution in Washington so that we could be better prepared for spotted lanternfly. And what we did was launch the Citizen Science Initiative, and we simply asked people to go out and report Tree of Heaven since we know it's here, but we just don't know where. So there was a news release, there was a really big effort to get everyone involved in the Tree of Heaven census, and we had really great results. We had 376 reports of the Tree of Heaven submitted within the month. And we also had, so remember that map, we had 8 new counties on that map are no longer white. So 8 new counties had verified Tree of Heaven. We hosted a webinar, which again focuses on awareness and trying to get people to think about the Tree of Heaven, what they can do, and the spotted lanternfly to emphasize reporting. And we had a big spike in our website visits and great social media as well. So really reporting is just so important to help us gain this valuable information. And this in turn helps, counties apply for funding if they can justify that they will be spending it, on removing Tree of Heaven, they can point to certain data points that say, yes, it's now a problem. We realize this. So reporting, very important. All right, let's see some key takeaways from this presentation. Everyone has a role to play, including you. You don't have to be a natural resource professional. You don't have to be an invasive species biologist. Everyone has this really important role to play. We covered awareness and also reporting, see something, say something. And we just urge you to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through, let's see, yes, not this. Well, we'll get to that. Walk you through both our website a little bit and EdMap so that you can see, you can visualize what exactly I've been talking about. So our website is invasivespecies.wa.gov, and this is the homepage. Now, directly on the homepage, you can go to report a sighting. And if you click report a sighting, you're going to be brought to the page where you can download our application. And remember, it's available for both iOS and Android. And here are the reporting forms based on what you are reporting. So we have, let's see, let's get that open. We have invasive plant, animal, insect, and wildlife disease. So we're looking at, let's say you wanted to report the Tree of Heaven. What you're going to do is simply just fill out this form and note red boxes do mean it's required, and that also involves a picture. So you are not able to submit either on the application or on the web form without a picture, because we really need that to verify the report. Some other things that are required are the state and county, observation date, and pest. Now, just like in the application, if you don't see your invasive species on here, you scroll all the way down to you, and there is an option for unknown plant, and that's going to be the same across all of the reporting forms. So after the report is complete, just make sure you hit submit, and then you will receive that email, and that's how you know that you were successful. So we also, remember I talked about the campaigns briefly in raising awareness. You can browse our various campaigns, and we have all of our priority species right here under the invasive species tab. So if you click our priorities, you're going to be brought to a page where you can browse all of them. You can filter them based on what organism you're looking for. And even better, let's say you found a brown marmorated stink bug flying around your house and you wanted to read about it. Well, you can read about it. There's also ways to differentiate them from native species. But the great thing about our website and the application is that you can make a report straight from the information page. So let's see, let's go back here. There's undertake action. You can find volunteer opportunities, different ways to address pathways, find solutions, and our event pages are here too. There's a way to contact us and just read more about the council, council members, and our various projects. So that's the Washington Invasive Species Council website. Now, as promised, here's a quick walkthrough of EdMaps. So it's with 2 Ds, edmaps.org. And remember, this is where your data points are going to go when you make that report. So the homepage is here, and what you might want to do is see the distribution of invasive species either in the nation or in the state. So if you're curious, what you're going to do is go to distribution maps. And you first have to select a species. So let's go with plants. Let's try to find the Tree of Heaven again. Tree of Heaven. So here you can either type in Tree of Heaven, but since it's a really big priority, it's already up here. There are 44,957 in the whole nation. Now, what you want to do, what I would recommend you do, is actually hit this point button instead of state or county. And then you're brought to this beautiful map, and you can see everything in the whole country. But if you're interested in Washington, you can just zoom in. And these points are going to get more specific as you zoom in. So it's kind of cool. Could lose a lot of time doing this. So let's see, I'm based near Olympia. So let's say we want to look at the Tree of Heaven in Olympia. You just keep zooming in. And if you click on a certain point, once you're way zoomed in, you get even more information. So let's see, we have a Tree of Heaven in Olympia that was reported almost exactly 2 years ago by Justin Bush. And if you click on the object ID, actually are brought to a new tab that shows a lot more information. So this is really great. I mean, you get the coordinates, you get whether or not it was verified, you get reporting, you get the reviewer information, you get the comments, very large, and location and pictures as well. So that's just something, an additional resource for you if that's something that you'd be interested in. So that's EdMaps. And I believe that is it for me. I'm happy to take any questions. Let's see if I can. Oh, yes. Okay. Are the photos on EdMaps also available for use by master gardeners? That's a really good question. I'm not sure. Probably, if I had to guess. Diane, I'm gonna get back to you on that because I don't know for sure and I don't want to give you the wrong information, but since it's public, probably. I'm not seeing easily an answer to that though. But I will definitely follow up with you on that. Any other questions? Well, if you think of some, we actually have a break coming up. So if you think of some, just continue to put them in the Q&A. So let's see. Speaking of break, there is a break now, screen break, coffee break. Please return at 10 a.m. We will start. Oh, I got some questions. No, you can't go yet. Okay. Did you say the app is not yet available? Oh, I hope I didn't say that. It is available for anyone and everyone. The video that you watched in the presentation is not available yet, but the application itself is available on our website. Oh, okay. Thank you for the compliment, Jeff. All right. Now I think you may go on break. We will see you back at 10 a.m. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Real quickly, there is one question that I think I want to answer for the whole group because it's a really great question. And that is, do you have any printed information about the Washington Invasive Species Council that we could show to Master Gardener clients? And this is applicable even if you're a city or municipality or a community and you have a brochure rack. The answer is yes, and I would love to send you some. So I am going to put my email in the chat for everyone to see. So please send me an email if you're interested in receiving some brochures. They are free, and it explains reporting and the importance of reporting. All right, so with that, I am very happy to turn it over to Scott Brooks from the Washington State Department of Agriculture. And he's going to be talking about the tree and shrub nursery stock inspection program in Washington.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to keep my video off during my presentation to preserve bandwidth, and can turn it back on after the presentation.
Perfect.
Can you see that? Everybody can see my PowerPoint now, hopefully.
So right now we're seeing a small window of it, and then your desk. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we can see it. Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Brooks. I'm with the USDA Plant Services Program, and I'll be giving you an overview of our tree and shrub nursery stock inspection in Washington, and wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on our program before we get into that. Hopefully this is moving along. I'm having a bit of a problem sharing my screen here. I apologize. Let me see if I can bring it up again. Can you see that?
Yes. We're seeing the edit mode, but yes, we can see the PowerPoint.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. I couldn't advance the slide, so let me try to do that here. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, so we're seeing yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, great. So here's the background on our program. Going back actually to 1891, we predate the creation of WSDA. Back then, there was a board of horticulture that was created. It was sort of a voluntary group that suggested regulations as pests were found in orchards, and so they would go out and look for these pests. The inspectors of fruit pests is what they were called. They would inspect orchards and nurseries, and they could direct those infestations to be taken care of. But there was nothing really binding about that group. About 4 years, they started to have more binding regulations under the board, and they had the ability to penalize violations and to enforce quarantines, and they actually would be able to put you and we certainly won't do that in this day and age, but back then they took it very seriously. And then in 1913, when WSDA was created, at that point, there were 10 horticultural inspectors at large, and there were 147 nurserymen with licenses and 109 nursery agents, which were like brokers at that point. And you can see that the fees for licenses were quite low. Many of the inspectors were on horseback back then. And flash forward to today, we now have 11 horticultural inspectors called environmental specialists. So we really expanded over the last 100 years by one inspector. And so we now are doing the same things that they did back then. We inspect retail and production nurseries, making sure that plants for sale are free of pests and diseases. There's over 6,800 licensed nurseries in the state. Our goals are to protect Washington's natural resources and agricultural industries from harmful insect, weed, and plant pests, and to also facilitate the movement of products, plant products to export markets. Our program is 100% supported by user fees, so that's nursery licenses, where our goals, their activities are to inspect those nurseries, and they pay a fee every year to be licensed. And we also certify a wide variety of plant products. You can see the logs rolled out there. We certify anything from hemp to hay to logs, lumber, Christmas trees, pretty much everything that the fruits and vegetable division and our department doesn't do falls to us. And we charge for those inspections. And we also administer planting stock certification programs to provide clean planting stock to our industries. Here is a map of our inspector territories, and we have 4 inspectors on the east side of the state and 7 on the west side of the state. And as mentioned, we certify a wide variety of plant products for export. In a typical year, we're certifying over $2 billion worth of agricultural products to 59 countries annually, and that's just our 11 inspectors doing that. So we're quite busy. It's quite an accomplishment for such a small group to issue over 30,000 phytosanitary certificates every year. And our planting stock certification program, there are 8 of those. And as I mentioned, they're directly related to big industries in Washington. We have one for fruit trees, sweet potato, grapevine, caneberry. And so those provide virus planting stock to people that are starting an orchard or a vineyard so that they can start with the cleanest possible plant material. And the focus of my talk today will be about nursery inspection and what we do there. And so as mentioned before, we inspected over 6,800 licensed nurseries in Washington, and we are enforcing 24 plant health quarantines throughout the state. And we're also partnering with the USDA on things like Phytophthora morum, which is a federal pest, looking for that on nursery stock, prohibited plants. Those are just a few of the things that we're looking at when we go to our nursery, looking for. And so there are some tools for inspection and quarantine compliance that I wanted to bring up and let you guys know about them. That's sort of things that we have in place before we even go to a nursery. And one of those is a notification requirement for woody plant material. And so this started around 2005 with sudden oak death. We were concerned about plants coming in from infested areas. So we wanted the ability to know when those plants were coming in, and that rule is still in place, and it's very good for emergent pests too, so we can kind of track and see what's coming into the state. And it applies to trees and shrubs, nursery stock that would go to retailers, wholesalers, or landscapers, and they are obligated within 48 hours to notify the department that they received plants. And then we are reviewing those invoices as they come in and seeing where they're coming from and identifying high-risk material that we may want to inspect. And we would let that separate before they incorporate it into their stock, into their inventory. And just so you know, about 80% of the plants that you might see in the retail nursery are most likely to be from California, Oregon, or Canada. And the rest, the 20%, are from maybe other states or from Washington that you would see at a retail nursery. We also have a notification requirement for Japanese beetle, and that applies to all plants that are in soil coming from states with established populations of Japanese beetle. So the shipper needs to notify us for that. So the shipper in the other state. And again, we're reviewing the notifications that come through, making sure that those plants have been treated or that they had exclusion methods that are approved by the Japanese Beetle Harmonization Plan. And that's a plan that has been agreed upon by the states for shipment of nursery stock. We're considered a Category 1 state here in Washington, although we do have a relatively recent infestation of Japanese beetle in Grandview that I'll talk about in a second. And Japanese beetle is bad because it feeds on over 300 types of plants, including a lot of ornamentals that people may have in their landscape. Another tool that we have is recently we added an inspector that their full-time focus is on online enforcement. So many plants are available online these days to be sold and shipped into Washington, kind of circumventing the whole nursery inspection that we would have for big shipments of plants. So people ordering plants through Etsy, eBay, and Amazon. Our inspector there had proactive enforcement of our quarantines, and we were very fortunate to get a grant from the USDA in order to do this pilot project. And so it consisted of reaching out to these vendors and these websites to make sure that they knew about our quarantines and that they were doing something about them. So they, in some cases, on our prohibited plants. So if you were to try to put, if you wanted to buy a Scotch broom and you put it into your cart at Amazon and you had a zip code from Washington, it will not allow you to get that plant. So that's good because I mean, there's people that look online and they see these Scotch broom varieties that are that have red flowers and they think they're beautiful, but honestly, we have more than enough Scotch broom in Washington. We don't need more. It's a prohibited plant. So that's a really good tool to keep those things out and to enforce our quarantines. And you can see the kind of the statistics for the last 2 years, number of websites on there, over 1,200. And that represents a website that we contacted that is now no longer shipping those plants. So that could be many different customers that are prevented from ordering those plants. So that's something that is really important to us, and we continue to do that today. We also do a lot of outreach and education for compliance. We have industry advisory committees that we meet with twice a year for nursery, grapevine, fruit tree, and Christmas tree. And we are informing them of emerging pests, letting them know so that they can spread the word. Presentations on spotted lanternfly, emerald ash borer, Japanese beetle. And we have a dedicated Japanese beetle inspector in our internal quarantine area in Grandview. And so, as I mentioned before, this was an infestation that was found recently within the last 2 or 3 years. And it started with trapment of 2 Japanese beetle in just a normal survey that we had going. And then because of that, that was pretty alarming. We put out kind of a notice to the community to see if anybody else had seen these, and we got a response from a lady that said that yes, that we set up a lot of traps in that area, Grandview, and the following year caught about 20,000 beetles. So that was pretty alarming, and now we have a quarantine in place to prevent the further spread of the beetle, and also an eradication effort is ongoing there. But we have a dedicated inspector that is working with nurseries around the outside of the quarantine area to make sure they're informed about what the beetle looks like and what they need to be doing communication wise with us. And then also for the nurseries inside the quarantine area, they have compliance agreements to make sure that they are not shipping the beetle out to other places in Washington or other states that do not have it. So there's compliance agreements that are part of the Japanese beetle harmonization plan. So the plants need to be treated or they need to be shipped free of soil. And so we watch that very closely. So once we're actually on the ground at a nursery, some of the things that we're looking at as far as quarantine enforcement, the big thing is that the plants for sale need to be free of pests and diseases. So that's a big one because the consumers are buying plants, and it's a real bummer to buy a plant, take it home, and find out it's infested with aphids or some other pest. So that's something that we have the authority to, when we find pests, that is WAC 16-402-15. And that means that all plants for sale need to be free of quarantine pests, free of pests that would be harmful if allowed to become established here, or practically free of plant pests. So that is like practically free of plant pests means like common allowance for some of those pests, but in general, they need to be free of those pests. Otherwise, we can order destruction or treatment. And we've got a number of quarantines too that directly correspond to the industries in the state working to keep out pests that we don't want on grapevines, viruses, or insect pests, blueberries, hops. So these are quarantines against other states. And so those things don't move in and become established and affect our industries. There's also a prohibited plants list, about 120 plants on that. Class A weeds that are not established here, or that some invasives that are not established here yet too. So we're making sure that those are not for sale at nurseries. And in a typical year, this is what we're finding. We may do roughly 700 nursery inspections a year. Some of the big things that we're finding, maybe the nursery doesn't have a license or it's expired. They're not complying with their notification rule. We're finding infestation of plant pests or diseases. And sometimes they have prohibited plants for sale too. So that gives you kind of a snapshot of what we're finding. And we conduct hundreds of growing season inspections annually for production nurseries, and it's not anything from trees that you see there on the left growing in the field to flower bulbs and to greenhouses, hanging baskets, you name it. If they have a nursery license and they're producing plant material, then we are trying to inspect them at least once every 2 years. That's kind of the goal for our program. And inspections on nursery stock, these are things that have happened recently. That picture there, that plant was on hold just last week. Our inspector was looking at some rhododendrons, I think, at a big box store, and it looked to her like there was maybe symptoms of sudden oak death, which is Phytophthora morm. So she put those plants on hold. It's a very strong host for sudden oak death, as are Camellia, Kalmia, Pieris, and Viburnum, popular ornamental plants. And this is a federal quarantine eradication protocol that the nursery needs to go through, where the plants are destroyed, sale. But this is something we've been dealing with for quite a while, since 2004. Sudden oak death is established in certain counties in California and one county in Oregon, and 40 million trees have died because of it. So this is something we want to keep out of Washington. It's just been found in nurseries for the most part today, a few landscapes, but we always go in and manage it and eradicate. There's no established population in our native environment, which is a really important thing for exports too. We're also doing surveillance for little cherry disease, and so that is a disease that's caused either by Western X phytoplasma or little cherry virus 1 and 2. We did some surveys on our registered mother trees in our certification program, and also did surveillance on incoming ornamental trees from California, and we found positive in both cases. And so this is something that we're dealing with a lot right now and hoping to get under control. And anytime we find that those trees need to be destroyed. And then last December, we intercepted elongate hemlock scale on roofs and porch pots at Walmarts, and we were tipped off by the Oregon Department of Ag that they had found it and identified it. And we went out to the Walmarts, and I think it was Pasco was the first one that we went to and immediately found it. The corporate office of Walmart to do a voluntary recall, and they pulled all of that material out of the stores in Washington and destroyed it. And so this is an important pest of conifers that is originally from Asia and established on the east coast of the US. And we're seeing it more now on Christmas trees coming in occasionally, and this greenery, this material is from North Carolina. So this is something that could affect our forests here and our Christmas tree growers. So we don't want this pest either. So just in general, when we're going out looking at nursery stock, we're occasionally finding pests like aphids, weevils, or borers. If there's something that we're not clear on what it is, then we always get an identification working with our entomologist in the department, and we can order destruction, return, or treatment of that material based on our CW 1724. And we're always doing surveillance for emerging pests of concern, things like spotted lanternfly, emerald ash borer, box tree moth, and making sure that our inspectors know what all those life stages look like, and speaking to the nurseries as they go out there so that they can be on the lookout for these things too. So that's all I have, and thank you. I hope you were able to get everything here. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Scott. I think there's a question. If there are any more questions, please put them in the Q&A. I think someone's asking for clarification on something, one of your slides, the 2% rule.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are those questions in the box too?
Yeah.
I have a hearing difficulty, and my caption is behind. It's not current with what you're saying. So do you have?
Uh-oh. You still there, Scott? Yeah, Scott. Okay, if you can hear me.
I'm sorry. Can you go ahead and
that's
try that
okay.
again?
Yeah. So the question's asking about the 2% rule that was either mentioned on one of your slides before the sudden oak death slide. Oh. Okay, I think Scott was having internet problems. Oh, he's back.
Dropped off there for a second. Sorry.
No,
My
that's
connection
okay.
pretty bad there towards the end. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so our 2% rule is something that that we have that we're looking for. If it's a common pest or disease, that if there's say 100 plants there and 2 of them are infested with an aphid, then we are allowing that to pass. But if we see more than that, then we are asking the grower to treat those plants. They need to be free of pests.
No. Okay, when Scott returns, I might ask him to finish that in the to finish typing that in the Q&A for you, Jeff. Any other questions for Scott? Put them in the Q&A and I will have him type out the answer. All right. So in the meantime, I think we can move on to our next session, which is on emerging pests of concern. And we have two speakers for this session, and we're going to start with Nathan Roueché. And sorry, Glenn.
Sorry about that. I thought I was first. Jumping the gun.
No, that's okay.
Can you stop my can you stop my share? I can't figure out how to stop it.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. I got it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, sorry about that. I was thinking that we can do Nathan first and then you can just fill up the rest of the time. So Nathan is gonna chat about the velvet longhorn beetle, and then we will hear from Glenn. And but Nathan is with the Washington State Department of Agriculture.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Hopefully internet works and this goes smoothly.
Yeah, looking good.
So far, looking good. Maria, can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
All right, excellent. All right, well, good morning, everybody. As Maria mentioned, my name is Nathan Roueché. I'm a biologist with the WSDA Pest program, and really appreciate Yolanda giving the thorough explanation of how the USDA and WSDA work together. I manage the CAPS survey for national priority pests. So I really appreciate that from Yolanda, so I don't have to spend too much time explaining where I fit in this and where my team fits in this overall process we're learning about. But I'm here today to talk about the velvet longhorn beetle, Trichoceros campestris, for those of you who are interested in the taxonomy. And it's an emerging generalist tree pest. Real quick overview. Sorry, I got something blocking half my screen here. So the velvet longhorn beetle it's currently undergoing a really rapid global range expansion, and this is mostly facilitated by human activities. The rate and spread of both interceptions with goods and at ports and detection of established populations in North America, and particularly the US, has increased dramatically in the last decade. So this is sort of the 4 points I'm going to touch on. This will be a pretty, hopefully, short and interesting presentation for folks. The biology, kind of some information as an alien invasive species, some information for all of you out there for increased detection, and then some information on velvet longhorn beetle in the Pacific Northwest. So the velvet longhorn beetle is native to Eastern and Central Eurasia, although it's really poorly documented in its native range. There are recent populations in Eastern Europe all the way through Western Europe, and it's kind of undetermined whether these are introduced by human activities, natural spread, or a combination of the two. Perhaps most fascinating about this species is it has an incredibly broad range of host trees that it will attack, with over 40 genera. I can't even imagine how many individual species that is, and we likely don't know. I suspect the genre count is even higher as it's entering new communities. And also significantly, it seems to so far show no preference between weakened, sick, damaged trees and fully healthy trees. It can also utilize dried wood, which is fairly unusual. And as mentioned, there's not too much known about it in its native range. So most of the current information about this species is from invaded communities, some from Europe and mostly from the United States. So I have lifted this diagram shamelessly from the Utah State University Extension. They're having some pronounced issues with this species, which I'll get to in a moment. But it has an annual life cycle spent within the host tree for the vast majority of that time, with an adult flight period briefly in July and August. I'd like to highlight there is some new literature out saying that they have multiple year life cycles. If that is the case, it will be in this larval stage within the tree, potentially going for 2 or more years. Not sure if that's documented in natural conditions or under laboratory manipulations. I mentioned has a really broad range of host species. Of documented hosts, apples and stone fruits, particularly peaches, seem to be the most important, but whether that's a preference or just a location they got and caused damage, or where they anticipated value, decreased value due to the presence of this is anticipated to occur. The list of deciduous trees is vast for an urban forest perspective and natural resources management. Tremendous variety of host trees attacked, which is fairly unusual. Also, crossing that border into conifers as well. And I believe this is both in laboratory and observed conditions. These host health characteristics, kind of mentioned earlier, weakened, diseased, and damaged trees, they do readily attack them, but also have been documented attacking and negatively impacting otherwise seemingly healthy trees, as well as utilizing cut and dried wood, including firewood and pruning slash. I think there's even some records of females laying eggs into cured lumber, such as pallets. Whether that resulted in a complete life cycle is unknown, but a real concern for containing spread. So ultimately, yeah, I think what we'll learn as Maria mentioned, this is an emerging pest section. This is an emerging pest. There's a lot we don't know about it, but so far it seems like it uses almost everything. So a little bit of the invasion history of this species. The rate of interceptions increased in the early 2000s in North America with increased trade, with products originating from the native range, being that both wooden products themselves and then other products shipped with wood packaging material. The mid 2010s, there were limited small populations known throughout North America, with one in Utah, north of Salt Lake City in the Salt Lake Basin being the largest. And we're pretty heavily infested a peach orchard and apple orchards as well, I believe. So some population genetics analysis conducted recently has suggested that these scattered populations throughout North America are due to repeat multiple independent introductions rather than domestic spread. I think that was in about 2020, but I think some of the most recent information is starting to suggest that we have entered the domestic spread stage, or likely will be entering it soon. So this species was encountered sporadically throughout the CAPS wood-boring insect surveys nationally. Around 2019, a specific sex pheromone lure was developed and tested in that peach orchard in Utah, became available for survey, and resulted in a very dramatic spike in detections throughout the country, which led to it being deregulated. As Yolanda mentioned, we have widely established populations and no real means to imagine curtailing that, as well as the continuing rate of introduction did lead to this being taken off the national priority pest list. Which means we're on to local detection. So damage characteristics associated with velvet longhorn beetle. It does prefer the trunks and larger branches of mature trees, generally not a nursery issue. Adult emergence holes are round, approximately 1 centimeter in diameter. Folks can be looking for frass at the base of the trunk. Larval galleries and pupal chambers in the cambium of a tree are a good indicator, and crown dieback and or epicormic shoots. For those of you familiar with wood-boring insects, none of this should sound new. Unfortunately, all of this damage is incredibly similar to that of other native longhorn beetles in the region. Coupling that with the wide range of host trees used, I think this will be kind of a cryptic species to detect, even if it is amongst us. Probably the most likely damage characteristic to lead to a detection would be the rapid decline of otherwise vigorous trees, particularly if it was like a community of trees rather than an individual monoculture, such as an orchard, just because this species would be attacking numerous others. But a lot of this is still to be determined as we learn more about it. And over here on the right, I have a couple of photos. The one at the top is a maple, an ornamental maple from Toronto, I believe. You can see that it just is experience a really pronounced dieback event, while the to the left in the upper right corner are maples of the same species on the block that were not infested. And then in the lower right is a photo from the orchard in Utah showing the branch dieback and the epicormic sprouting on perhaps a peach tree or an apple tree. But yeah, none of this is really unique, unfortunately, whereas things like emerald ash borer or Asian longhorn beetle have really pronounced characteristics that set them apart, or specific hosts. We don't have that, or at least are unaware of it yet with velvet longhorn beetle. So as I mentioned, it was removed from the National Priority Pest List in 2022. The domestic spread seems inevitable. You can see here, this is a screenshot from iNaturalist recently. There's a large established population in Utah, which does straddle the interstate. So there's abundant pathways and then a broad range of hosts being affected. Public reports of velvet longhorn beetle on iNaturalist in just the last 2 years has shown a kind of a dramatic spike in detection by the public in the Northwest. I'm not entirely sure what's going on down in California. All of these points are pretty recent, last year, maybe 2 years. So it looks like they've got something going on down there as well. These public detections are pretty much mirrored by our incidental catch of velvet longhorn beetle in the Northwest, both within the projects I manage as well as in communication with my colleagues at Oregon Department of Agriculture. So this is a species that is here. It probably hasn't been here long enough for us to have a good sense of where it is capable of going and what damage it's likely to cause. So this truly is an emerging pest in our region, an emerging pest nationally as well. And moving on to identification beyond damage, these traits, I tried to pick a few that I thought could be potentially visible in hand or with a handheld loop. They're not definitive, but hopefully get folks excluding a couple really similar natives. It does have a velvet-like fuzzy body, which is pretty noticeable on the wing coverings. It's a little bit blotchy sometimes. The eyes will be the compound eyes will be a C around the base of the antenna, which is not super easily seen in hand. And then the scutellum, the little portion between the wing coverings at the base will be just slightly lighter than the rest of the wing coverings. There won't be any spines on the sides of the thorax, and the antenna is not longer than the body. These are incredibly subtle traits. Again, unlike some of our ones, such as spotted lanternfly or Asian longhorn beetle. I think part of the biggest concern with velvet longhorn beetle is how well it's going to just kind of blend into the background. Nothing about the insect is distinctive. Nothing about its damage is particularly unique. So this one can probably largely fly under the radar. We've got some really similar endemic species. This certainly isn't the most endemic or the most similar. They're just the two I picked I think folks would be most likely to encounter. And these differences are really subtle. We've got the velvet longhorn beetle on the left with that somewhat lighter scutellum and the fuzzy, kind of almost mottled blotching on the wing coverings, compared to the black spruce borer, Asimum striatum, and another borer of conifers in our region that's fairly common, Megasimum aspirum. These lines or striations down the wing coverings are a really good indicator that if you encounter something you think could be velvet longhorn beetle, it isn't. There are no lines or striations or ridges running down these wing coverings. And that most others should appear pretty glossy. But again, these are really subtle differences. So in some ways, velvet longhorn beetle is going to be a fairly mysterious pest for us all to keep an eye on and to encounter as it establishes. Just kind of moving on to main takeaways. This is a recently relevant insect, which unfortunately means there's a lack of information. Not much is known about it in its native range, including where even the native range is fairly ambiguous. So most of the information about it that's known is from recently invaded communities. These establishments are mostly recent, which means that the long-term impacts may not be something that we're even aware of yet. And again, that broad range of host trees, which it's going to impact the most may be largely yet to be seen. And again, a really important point is we have yet to figure out whether it has a preference for healthy or unhealthy trees, or if it has a specific host that is particularly prone to infesting. So I would say that right now, the velvet longhorn beetle is kind of entering the next phase of its biological invasion, moving through the transportation and introduction into the establishment and spread portion of a biological invasion, with the impact yet to be determined. The documentation and reporting will help us locate damage and also fill in these knowledge gaps for other areas that may be encountering this pest. And I added this just really quick. I didn't want to include it, but Stephanie did such a great job of explaining it. With this establishment and spread stage, we've got the invasion curve over here on the right. My assessment is that we are about at the point of the arrow on the invasion curve with this species. It is widespread, likely spreading on its own, and with still entering the country with new goods. I don't think anything has slowed about the rate at which it's being introduced, and now the spread as well domestically is likely occurring. So this is at the stage where it will fall to local managers to handle the individual impacts in the their respective areas of operation. Which all sounds really doom and gloom. So as things with new invasive species often do, I guess I'd also like to stress that we don't know what's going on with this yet as far as impacts. It doesn't seem like it's going to have quite the level of impact as something like emerald ash borer, Asian longhorn beetle, or spotted lanternfly. This thing is around a lot. It probably was around quite a bit. The availability and the development of that lure dramatically increased how many we were able to see. So this could have been amongst us for quite some time. So I think we're still kind of in a wait and find out mode here. And if you have any questions, if there's time, I can address them now, or we can wait till the end after Glenn speaks about other pests.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Yeah, we're going to move on to Glenn, but please put your questions in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Q&A for Nathan, and as well as Glenn. And we will address those at the end. All right, great. So now I'm happy to introduce Glenn Kohler from the Department of Natural Resources, and he's going to talk about some more emerging pests of concern.
All right, more doom and gloom, right? Okay, so I'm kind of focusing on, all right, my name's Glenn Kohler. I'm a forest entomologist with the Washington Department of Natural Resources in Washington State, and I'm going to talk about some emerging forest pests, 4 of them that are of concern in Washington and Oregon. The one on the left here, the Mediterranean oak borer, is really new event in Oregon, certainly just within the last couple of years, and before that, fairly recent introductions in California. It's a non-native ambrosia beetle, which are related to bark beetles, but have a very different biology and attack pattern. I'll talk about that more. But this is one of those that wasn't really on anybody's radar. As you know, hey, it's on the East Coast, you know, like emerald ash borer, it's going to move west and end up out here, as emerald ash borer has in Oregon. And so this kind of just came out of nowhere. So there isn't a lot known about how to even monitor and manage it. And then I'm going to talk about a couple things that are, you know, most of this summit has been about non-native invasives. And I'm going to talk about a couple of insects that are native to our area, but they're emerging as important pests because they seem to be killing more host trees or damaging more host trees in areas where they hadn't in the past. And so an example is this bark beetle called the California five-spined ips, which is native to California and Oregon. All right, so hopefully I can advance slide. There we go. A little delay there. So Mediterranean oak borer, or mob, is it's going to be called, apparently, since the name is long. This is an ambrosia beetle, so they look like bark beetles. They're very closely related, but the bark beetles feed in just the phloem cambium layer on the sugars in the phloem, whereas ambrosia beetles, and there's a ton of native ambrosia beetles around, they're going to be indistinguishable from these. They bore straight through the bark and right into the sapwood. And essentially, they carry fungi with them that they're very adapted to use as a food source. And so they inoculate the sapwood with the fungus, which then grows on the wood. And so they're not eating sugars or wood material like bark beetles or wood borers, they're eating the fungus. And it's an essential nutrient for them to survive. Their offspring eat it. So basically, they're using the tree to farm fungus. And I'll show you what those tunnels and galleries look like, but you've probably all seen them before. This is a very, very tiny insect, as you can see in the inset picture here. Not the type of thing that anybody's going to be detecting and reporting on EdMaps or anything like that. Mostly it's going to be seeing frass or galleries, that type of thing, where people notice this or the damage in oaks. So native to Europe, West Asia, North Africa, and the real issue here is not so much the beetles, is the fungus that they're vectoring, a Raffaella and a Fusarium, that are causing a wilt disease. And don't confuse this with oak wilt, which is a common name for another disease in oaks in the southeast US. So I don't think this disease has a common name yet, so we're just going to call it mob for now. But the fungus is what's causing the decline and death in these trees. So the first Oregon detection of this was in 2018 near Portland, in traps that were already out for other purposes, as has been discussed today. And then in Woodburn in 2021. Currently, it's now in 4 different counties of Northwest Oregon. 22 beetles were caught. So it's not a ton of beetles, but the concern here is that they're showing up in all these different locations. So it's not a case where, you're trapping your report and they're just coming out of some pallets right there and, you can get rid of that pinpoint source. It's more like, it sadly appears that they've moved around quite a bit. The males are incredibly tiny compared to the females, if you can imagine. Something even smaller than this. So you're probably not going to see those, and the males don't fly, so they don't show up in traps. There are 2 or more generations per year, and this is what the damage looks like. These are photos from California, where this was first detected infesting trees, not just in traps. And so you're getting this crown dieback symptom from the fungi infection. And it starts in one portion of the crown, and then we'll move, the dieback will move downward to the next branch fork. And then you'll kind of see the progression of branches dying, sort of a top-down pattern. And it can take, so that, they're attacking over multiple years, and it can take 3 to 5 years for this fungus to reach the main stem and actually girdle and kill the tree. Things that you would notice if you saw a symptomatic tree, and of course, you've all seen dying oak from other things that could look like those previous photos. So what you need to look for, it's not drought or something else, is the frass. And it's white powdery, because as I mentioned, they're going straight into the sapwood. And here you can see those galleries now. That I was talking about, and they're black stained, and you've all seen that in firewood from the native ambrosia beetles, and that's the fungus that they're feeding on. And note, a unique characteristic of this species is they're not really tunneling into the heartwood of the tree. The white frass is not diagnostic just by itself, because like I mentioned, there's a lot of native ambrosia beetles and even some other non-natives that haven't become pests that are established in Washington and Oregon. And so that might be, so really the only way to confirm this is to get samples of the branches and hopefully some adult beetles that can be identified, or plating out the fungus to identify that. So this is the generally infested area in California. It's kind of unfortunately past that point of eradication potential because it's more widespread. Napa counties, Lake County, Sonoma, and Sacramento up to 2020, and the pathways aren't really well understood. Probably the movement of untreated oak wood, and you know, potentially wineries that make their own barrels importing wood from Europe. I don't know. Hosts in California have been valley oak and blue oak, possibly black oak, and also Oregon white oak is a host, unfortunately. And one of the, so far what we understand about this, which could be hopefully a little bit of good news, is that they tend to be attacking only oaks that are suffering from drought or other stressors, other diseases. So declining oaks are more targeted. So the status in Oregon, this is a tree near Troutdale, which is, you know, just east of Portland. It is right across the Columbia River from Washington. And this tree definitely had Mediterranean oak borer in it. And you can see the confirmation of the galleries, and then they got the beetles identified. So this was the first in-tree infestation of this species in Oregon white oak in Oregon, unfortunately. And even more unfortunately, as of September of this year, it's now been confirmed in Oregon white oak in Wilsonville, which is just south of Portland, near I-5. So this is not only coming out as sort of a surprise, but also something that appears to be a little bit more aggressive and spreading more quickly than we may have time to catch up with it. There is a trapping effort as part of established traps in Washington across the Columbia. Has not been detected in Washington yet, but there will be more trapping effort next season. And I just, it's hard to imagine it doesn't get across the Columbia at this point, being so close to our border, unfortunately. I just want to point out oak pit scale. Some of those earlier photos I showed you from California had this kind of epicormic leaf growth, almost like a dwarf mistletoe, or sorry, a mistletoe type of signature. There's a tiny sucking insect, a scale insect that causes these swellings on oak twigs. That a symptom of the oak pit scale infestation is this clumping crown dieback and clumping of leaves that are smaller than usual. And this insect is also non-native, but it's well established from California into Washington. And so the Columbia River Gorge has a lot of oak pit scale going on. And so these symptoms are there. It might predispose some of the oaks. The oak pit scale by itself can manage to kill oaks that are super drought stressed. Tends to be worse in open grown trees. So just be on the lookout for that one. And if you're seeing white frass of a dying oak, make sure that you're reporting that. Okay, so completely shifting gears to a native species, the California five-spined ips. There's another bark beetle in the Ips genus that's more common in Washington and Oregon called Ips pini. And that's found all across the state of Washington. The difference is the number of spines on the rear end of the wing covers. Oops. Here, the California five-spined Ips has 5 pairs of these, and the Ips pini only has 4. The galleries that they make, it's kind of an inverted Y pattern. This is a nuptial chamber where the mating occurs, and you have 3 different females that mate in there and lay eggs down these 3 different egg galleries. And so if you're looking at, you strip the bark off a tree and you see this under the bark, the open fork of the Y would be facing the ground for this California species. Not super diagnostic because the Ips pini makes a similar branched gallery. So primarily what we've seen this doing is moving northward from the Willamette Valley up into Washington. Primarily it's been in ponderosa pine and the Columbia River Gorge area, but just this year, we're seeing it in shore pine and Austrian pine, kind of more landscape type trees in urban situations around the Puget Sound. And that just kind of came out of nowhere because this thing has been detected in Washington since 2010. It prefers small diameter, it can breed in branches down to 3-inch diameter. It'll kill tops of trees, branches of trees, and young trees as well. The shore pine and Austrian pine mortality that we've been seeing is like whole tree mortality. And so usually we see outbreaks of these following like someone's doing logging or pruning and leaving a bunch of that larger branch material lying around, or after storms or fires that create a lot of breeding material. And then during drought periods, trees are more stressed, and so of course the beetles are more successful, and so the outbreak can be worse. So the history of this is the map in the bottom there shows the range of this species as of 1987. Conveniently just stops right at the Columbia there. Since 1999, it's become more of a pest issue in the Willamette Valley, with more increased planting of the Willamette Valley variety of ponderosa pine, and first reported, as I said, in across the Columbia in 2010, also in ponderosa. Outbreaks are usually short-lived because if they don't have this fresh breeding material, then they're unable to kind of build up enough population to kill trees again the following year. So management is really focused on, as with the more common Ips pini, really focused on treating that breeding material during the flight period from mid-April to July. It's the risky time. If you have fresh slash on the ground, they're going to enter that, breed up, and then emerge very quickly. So the life cycle is like from egg to adult is about 8 weeks. So they can turn over 2 to 3 generations in a single season, and build up some pretty incredible numbers. So if you want to avoid that, you do this, creating this material, heavy pruning or thinning, you do that in the safe period from August to December. If you're leaving that around, that gives it enough time to dry out and not be suitable for these beetles. If you're working during that January to July, quote unquote, risky period, you want to have some plan to treat the slash, burning, lopping, and scattering into smaller pieces, chipping it. Normally in Western Washington, we wouldn't be concerned about pine. And again, we're just talking about pine here, not firs or spruce or hemlocks. It's just pines. Normally, we wouldn't be concerned about slash management thinking in Western Washington. And now I'll show you some pictures of where this beetle is, and now it being causing this mortality in the Puget Sound. Here's a picture from Renton this year in the Austrian pines in an urban area. That it's probably a good idea just to be on the safe side if you are working in pines, to try to clean that stuff up and not just leave it lying around. So places where we've recently seen this, Fort Lewis, JBLM, that is the first location where it was detected in ponderosa pine. There's a native population of ponderosa there in Western Washington. And then these 3 places in the Puget Sound. We're thinking that it's probably related to recent drought issues that the beetles are able to take advantage, but there's a lot of the California 5-spined Ips flying around the Puget Sound area. These individual branches of these trees in this picture are filled with hundreds of beetles. That's kind of what this looked like on the Columbia River Gorge, some dead ponderosa highly visible from the bridge on the shore. And so this species is capable of killing large trees, unlike the native Ips pini, that's usually top kill or smaller trees. So we've been monitoring this since 2010 to see where it is in Washington using these funnel traps, and kind of quit doing that in 2018 because we thought we'd kind of figured out where it was. 50 locations in 27 counties. We're not trapping those every year, but just kind of as we pick them up. And through 2018, the red boxes are where we've detected these. This whole area up in Western Washington, very low numbers. But as you get down in Vancouver and the Columbia River Gorge, the numbers are rather high. And the yellow is where we have traps and didn't detect it. And then the blue now is where we've gotten reports in trees, the shore pine, Austrian pine type. And the black diamonds are where we put up traps this year to see if it's expanding further north. So now, we can add King County to the list of infested counties, and seeing mortality in trees for the first time on the west side. So we don't know if this is, they're just reoccupying a historic range, or if they're moving northward. We don't have a lot of evidence for that. But the take-home message here is just be aware that this is becoming more important, especially with more frequent drought, that it may be more of an issue on the west side. And so now we got 150 miles north of that in 1987 range and 210 miles east as far as Walla Walla, where this thing has moved. And you can see back in 1966, wasn't really that far up into Oregon. Okay, so quickly, I've only got about 10 minutes left to do two more. So we have the bronze birch borer, which you may be familiar with. It's in the same genus as emerald ash borer, so kind of a slender buprested wood borer, not that bright metallic green color, but more of like a bronze olive colors, very similar size and shape though. And so could be kind of a native look-alike of the emerald ash borer. So emphasis on this one, kind of like California five-spined ips, this is native to North America. All the birch species are potential hosts. And the reason it's an emerging pest is because there's been an increase in planting of landscape or ornamental birch for many, many years. And essentially, the more you're planting the birch, the more you're going to get this bronze birch borer responding to birch that are drought stressed, because typically this is considered a secondary damage agent. So going after trees that are disturbed or damaged by something else. So what you're looking for, like a lot of these other wood borers, like velvet longhorn beetle, is kind of a slow crown dieback, starting with chlorosis or yellowing of the leaves and proceeding down the crown. And that may happen over a couple of years. Kind of the trees aren't killed immediately, as like with bark beetles. Birch prefers the cool, moist locations. They have shallow rooted systems. And so the most susceptible trees are those that are off-site planted or really crummy sites that are drought, high drought potential, and the things I mentioned that predispose them to attack. So a healthy tree can survive these attacks. And one of the responses they have is this callus growth. You can actually see with the wood borer larvae mining under the bark, that's their pattern, and they're causing this swelling. And that response by the tree, a healthy tree, can actually kill off the larvae. And but if they get attacked multiple years, even healthy trees can go out. So look for those swelling patterns, the zigzag or serpentine galleries under the bark. They're just feeding in that phloem cambium layer. So that's where the galleries are going to be, kind of like bark beetles, and they have the D-shaped exit hole. It's going to be like 1/4 inch wide or smaller. It's very similar to emerald ash borer, but these exit holes are way, way easier to see on a white barked birch than in ash trees. They're pretty obvious. I just saw one on my walk around the neighborhood yesterday. The larvae will create a pupal chamber just under the bark. Sorry, just into the sapwood or xylem, but not very far into that. And so management, you're really focused on tree vigors in the landscape setting, all the things that you would do to increase tree vigor, especially thinking of drought and managing other pests that might stress these trees. In a forest situation, be really careful about thinning or working around birch, quote unquote, daylighting birch. Any kind of heavy disturbance of the root systems is not going to be good. There's a whole list of, and you can get this from WSU Extension publication. The Forest Service has a forest insect disease leaflet on this one, and listing some of the susceptibility of these different betular birch species. So if you're planting, you might have an opportunity to think about that, and basically just don't be planting birch on the drier sites. They might do well when they're small, but as they get big and need more water, this is almost inevitable. And then pesticides, for high value trees, of course, really needs to focus on prevention of the attack before trees are heavily infested. Once you see that crown day back, it may be too late to have the pesticides save that tree. Okay, so the last one, and these slides are from Todd Murray with WSU Extension. So I'm not super familiar with winter moth, but these are pretty simple slides. So if you have any deep thought questions, I may not be able to answer them. But this is a geometrid family of moth, Lepidoptera, and they do that kind of inchworm type movement that you've all seen. So that's kind of distinctive for the geometrid larvae. Introduced to Canada originally in the East from Europe, 1930, and then in the Pacific Northwest in the 80s. And recently reemerged, like in Northeast U.S., Massachusetts comes to mind as a newer pest in the 2000s. So this one is really weird because the males are actively flying from November through January, at least if the temperatures are above freezing. So kind of our west side environment is more suited toward these. The females do not fly, not really developed wings at all there. So they have to attract males using pheromones. And so that may limit their distribution initially, kind of like the spongy moth is similar in that way, at least the European variety of spongy moth. The Asian variety can't fly. So eggs are deposited singly on bark, and then when the larvae become active or hatch out of the eggs in the early spring, and they're going for the buds. And this is not just a forest pest, it's probably actually more potential for like an agriculture pest in blueberries and cherries, and you can see some of the hosts listed here. And so the bright green larvae are chewing on the buds, and then when they're older and they run out of food in the buds, they'll disperse by the ballooning, which is making a silk, and you've all seen caterpillars hanging from a silk thread, and they just blow off in the wind on that to new areas to feed on. This is an important one. They pupate in the soil. So the mature larvae drop down and create a pupal case or cocoon in the soil. So this is a movement pathway risk, like if people are digging up live plants in the forest and moving them to new areas. That's how it's thought it might have gotten to these new areas, is not necessarily nursery trade, but maybe collecting live plants and transporting them across the Atlantic. So some of the management, I just refer you to WSU Extension for any specifics on this as far as pesticides go. Look for bud damage, bright green larvae, and kind of scouting, just knowing that you have this, getting it identified. There is another species, the Bruce spanworm, that it can be easily confused with. So just make sure you know what you have before you're treating and you're checking with WSU. Since they pupate in the soil, the adults will crawl up the bark of the tree to lay eggs. So remember, those females, they're not flying up there, so they got to crawl. So you can do some tanglefoot type to prevent that around high value trees. not sure about the effectiveness of that. And lastly, there are some biological control organisms, this tachinid fly and an ichneummonid wasp, that seem to be effective. They were both introduced in British Columbia on the west side in the 70s and are established there and seem to be keeping winter moth at a very low level. So that's one of the success stories with this one. So be on the lookout for that in your neighborhood, among many other things we've talked about. And I will stop it there for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Yep.
All right, let's see questions. This may seem like an odd question, but do you ever get reports of drone pests and the idea of conspiracy theories?
Drone pests?
Yes.
Okay. I don't even know what that is. So that's my answer.
Fair enough, yeah.
And you can think I may be part of the conspiracy, but I do not know what a drone pest is. So maybe
Okay,
some
there's
clarification is needed.
Yeah, robotic bugs.
Oh, robotic bugs? You mean so like attaching little cameras to cockroaches and stuff like that?
Potentially that could be
And
it.
controlling their minds? Yes, I've seen that. You can actually do that. Insects have very stereotypical behavior, and if you pull a nerve, they'll move in the direction of or away from the nerve, and so you can control a cockroach electronically. I don't know why you do that. Hopefully for a good purpose, but.
Okay, this is related to the winter moth, I believe. I've been in this location here in Seattle for the last 6 years. When will they be done and move on?
So have they been seeing winter moth for the last 6 years? Is that what I'm hearing?
That I think that's the implication.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think with that one, I would definitely recommend if you're trying to manage that and you know it's winter moth or you need to get it verified, that you contact Todd Murray with WSU Extension. He would be a really good resource for answering your question about whether or not it's going to move on. My understanding is that it's essentially more widespread and established in some areas, and so once it's got a foothold like that, it's going to be really impossible to eradicate. It's more about management.
All right. Thank you. If you have any more questions for Glenn, put them in the chat. I just wanted to give a quick summary of the questions for Nathan. Nathan, thank you for answering those. Larval characteristics that can be used to identify the velvet longhorn beetle and differentiate them? Likely not. Probably nothing to distinguish the velvet longhorn beetle from native species. And July and August is likely the best time in the Pacific Northwest to see the adult. They originate from Central and Eastern Asia. Please check in with Utah State University for management strategies, and you can view the Q&A, and Nathan did provide a link to that. And all right, that's everything. Let's see. Oh, one more question for Glenn. Wondering if the IPS is responsible for the pine death along the I-5 corridor trees, seeing a ton of dead stands while driving.
Okay, so I think so. The Department of Transportation contacted us because yes, those trees were super obvious. And they had planted a lot of shore pine, which is, the west side lodgepole pine along I-5. And normally that's a great species for such a crummy site. And they sent me pictures, and the galleries were 100% the correct pattern, and the inverted Y. And given that I confirmed California fried spine dips in Mercer Island and Renton and Bothell, I never got them to agree to get me out on this site. They said, oh, we have to have this whole thing because it's on the highway. with safety, and they're going to take the trees down and remove them and dispose of them. And so I thought they're going to have people out there operating at some point, and I was going to get, because they basically told me they didn't want me pulling off of I-5, and I probably shouldn't have anyway, by myself. So I never got to see those, but I'm pretty certain that's what's going on with those trees.
All right. Well, I believe those. Oh, okay. Emerging pest treatments. I think you talked about that for each pest, but maybe broadly overall, are there treatments for the pests, or does it really just depend?
Well, it really depends. I mean, prevention is always your best bet. Like if you know something is more widespread, that, and you have the susceptible host tree, things that you can do to prevent it from attacking, because a lot of these things respond to stress. And so anything you can do to increase tree vigor and success, especially during those droughty periods. But as far as, some of these things like Mediterranean oak borer, yes, it responds to stress trees, we think. But emerald ash borer will kill healthy ash trees, and maybe Mediterranean oak borer could do the same with oaks. And so those kind of pests are really more about preventing spread. Once you have them in a stand, it's so important to get it identified and remove infested host material as quickly as possible to keep it from spreading.
All right, Daria just dropped a link in the chat to Oregon's Mediterranean oak borer fact sheet, so check that out. And with that, we are having another break. So feel free to take a break until 11:30, and we'll be back for our last session. Thank you. And thank you so much, Glenn and Nathan.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are going to continue with the last presentation of today. So I'm very pleased to introduce Cassie Cichorz from the Washington State Department of Agriculture. And she's joining us, I think, from Idaho. So thank you thank you for agreeing to speak, even though you're at a conference. She's going to talk about some statewide pest update.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I do outreach for the pest program at the Department of Ag, so I just like to keep everybody informed on what's going on and most importantly, how you can help. I'm not at my normal setup, so it might take me again a minute to get my presentation displaying the right way. Okay. And okay, are you seeing the presenter view?
We are seeing, yes. Well, no, the right view, whichever view that is. It looks
Perfect.
good.
I don't have my extra monitor, so I was like, oh, I probably should have tried that. So again, as you can see on the screen, some of the things up there we're going to be talking about. Some of it you might have already heard of, some of it might be new to you. But from the State Department of Agriculture's perspective, with these pests that are on the screen, we like to think about eradication, right? And complete removal of that pests. And a lot of the time we think about that as being like impossible and really hard to do. But I would like to point out that the Department of Ag, has been successful and intercepting pests and making sure that they don't get to live there with citrus longhorn beetle. You don't hear a lot in the news about spongy moth, formerly known as gypsy moth, because each year we set thousands of traps to hopefully catch and then work towards removing them before they become a problem. And hopefully next on a eradication success story is with the hornets. So sometimes it takes years of process to do, but it's not always out of the question impossible. One of the current programs that we're working on is Japanese beetle, right? So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the pests, and then I'm going to kind of share with you what we're doing and how people can help. So when you think about Japanese beetle, think about the size of your pinky finger, as the adult beetle will be out in the summer. It's about that size. It has copper wing covers with a metallic head, little patches of hair on the side and the tip of its abdomen. But typically you can see the destruction it causes, right? These beetles, they love flowers, they love roses, and they love anything that's green and leafy. And what they do is they skeletonize, right? And they eat and they eat and they eat. Buds, flowers, and fruits too as well. And they're considered highly invasive to roses, grapes, hops, corn, and lots of other things that we have. Basically, they don't discriminate, and they feed on over 300 different types of plants. However, when they're not being adults in the summer, they are living below the surface as grubs or larvae. Think of it as a white C-shaped grub with a brown tan head and visible legs. And then think about where grubs live. And it's going to be in the soil, anywhere from an 1/8 to an inch long. Now, grubs are really hard to tell what type of grub it is, especially when it's in the soil. It could be some of our native beetles, or it could be Japanese beetle if it's been discovered there before. But what they do is they move around in the soil and they eat the roots of ornamental grasses, right? So in the spring, people will go to water their lawns and they will have yellow patches that just won't turn green. Think about your schools, your parks, and not just your backyard, but lots of the landscapes around you. And then if we have a bunch of yummy grubs below the surface, that kind of invites lots of different critters, crows, skunks, and other rodents to come in, dig the grass up further to get to those nice feastly grubs below the surface. So that's kind of the direct damage that Japanese beetle causes. When those grubs are in the ground, it's going to be kind of that springtime, and they are mobile, so they'll move around to find the proper soil moisture, content, temperature till they pupate. Into those summer months, when those adults will be up on the surface, they'll be eating, mating, and actually going back down to lay eggs, coming up and continuing that cycle. In the fall, those adults will die, but what we'll have left are the new grubs from those eggs that have hatched. And they're going to continue to move around and eat until the winter. And they're going to go down just deeper into the soil to keep them safe from those winter frosts, snow, and etc. Then that life cycle is just going to continue. So that's kind of the destruction. If we think about them living below the surface and living above the surface, we can think about how they can move. If I have some soil or I have a potted plant and I dig that up and I move it, eventually an adult beetle could pop out. The same thing if it's during the summer and I clip some flowers, I move some leaves, some debris, even some grass clippings, and I take them to the landfill or I dump them off on my neighbor's property, I'm going to give them beetles as well. So the beetles are a really good hitchhiker. They can spread themselves, but they're really good at spreading through human manipulation. So how the heck do we have them over here? Or where do they live now in the United States? Well, I got a nice map here for you. Look at areas of green and then look at areas of the purple. Purple is they have the beetle. It's not going anywhere. Green is where we're looking for the beetle and we don't consider yet that we have it, right? Basically, the states on the East Coast and the states on the West Coast got together and we said, you guys keep it. We don't want it. So they developed a harmonization plan, which is just kind of like federal rules and regulations to help prevent the spread of the beetle, kind of an agreement between us coasties, right? To support that here in Washington, we started surveying for the beetle or looking for the beetle in the 90s, and other states, as you can see through the picture here, also survey. So they set traps to look for the beetle and see if it's there. Now, the beetle itself can't really fly itself from the East Coast to the West Coast. So how the heck can it get here? Well, I showed you some potted plants that could be moved, but one of the ways it likes to travel is in air cargo and through airplanes. So you can see here they have a plane being screened, so that way as they're removing stuff, no beetles are able to fly out and leave. Historically, in the past, if we've ever found beetles in Washington, they've been around airports. So the airport has that it's been one beetle, it's been removed, the airport's treated, and we haven't had beetles persisting in Washington. However, that's kind of changed in the last couple years. So now we're actually working on an active eradication. And to get rid of beetles, whether this is Oregon or Idaho, the process is slightly the same, but in the way that it takes multiple years. It takes multiple years of trapping for the beetles, treating for the beetles, and even a quarantine is possible. And that's kind of what we're looking at here in Washington State. I'll go ahead and dive into what each of these looks like separately. So first, trapping for the beetles, right? Japanese beetle traps are pretty available commercially, online, on the internet. They look a little different, but they all have the same kind of idea. The top of the trap has a pheromone lure, which is a scent, like it could smell like roses or other beetles, attracts the beetles, they fall in the bag or they fall in the trap and die. So what do you think all those little black things are in the bottom of that bag? Right, that is a trap filled with beetles. That's what people's backyard could look like if they have Japanese beetles. Now, the good thing is this picture is from the East Coast, so it's not quite what we're dealing with yet, maybe over in Washington, but it could end up being like that. So the first thing that we do is we get all these traps out, and here's kind of where we've set them. We set them all across Washington State, right, to make sure there aren't beetles in new areas, but we really put lots of traps in the areas where we know beetles are. So if you get in your car, right, and you're in Yakima, and you drive through the lower Yakima Valley to the Tri-Cities, this is kind of the map that you're looking at. See any white dot? That's where we have most of our beetle traps. Then you go back to the airport on the east or in Western Washington, and then throughout the rest of the states, dotting places of transportation where people might spread beetles. What the traps do is they catch the adult beetles, so they're not as well able to go back down into the soil and lay eggs, and it helps us see if the beetles are spreading. In Washington State right now, we have beetles detected in 3 different areas. The area of Wapato and surrounding areas, so brighter colors, which is going to mean that the beetles are just higher density, meaning there's more beetles. And then as you move outside of town, you'll notice that there's less. The same thing is true for this is a map of the Grandview area. So when you kind of look at this and you think about if the beetles, when they're grubs, they really like to eat ornamental grasses. And you're going to think about people's houses, right? Ornamental grasses are higher in urban areas. So that's where the majority of these beetles are going to be. Unfortunately, this year, we also caught beetles in Pasco, right? So those are the 3 areas that we're working on. That is where we're going in and we're going to be trapping and continuing to trap for the beetles. Before moving on, there was a question in the chat box. Are 3 beetle traps you showed equally effective? I'm not going to say one beetle traps works better over the other one, but more along the lines of some beetle traps, right? The bag at the bottom, you can use once and then you can toss it. Sometimes they're reusable, and then there's probably a difference in cost, but basically they all kind of work off the same sense of there's a pheromone lure at the top that attracts the beetle, and that's kind of what makes it work. It's usually just the method of catching it if it's like a bag you toss or if it's a harder plastic that you reuse. That's kind of the idea behind those bag traps. Putting the traps up can be like your first thing, your early detection. If you're living in an area without beetles, you would hope not to have one. That's why we kind of set them throughout Washington. Once you are living in an area with beetles, it can be one way to help lower the population. In addition to trapping, the other thing that we do is treating for the beetles. Right now, the type of treatment that we use is we apply an insecticide to those ornamental grassy areas, right, to people's lawns, and we target those grubs so that those grubs go ahead and intake that pesticide, and then it helps slow them from moving forward to the next year. So that's trapping, that's treating, And then the last thing is quarantine. And after you combine these over a couple years, hopefully you'll beetle numbers start to decrease. So when I talk quarantine, right, I'm not really talking COVID. I'm talking about we create an imaginary boundary that restricts movement of items. So think about all those plants that beetles can live on in the summer, and those flowers and our grass clippings and our yard waste, right? If I live in an area where beetles are and I move that, then I'm going to spread beetles. So we create this imaginary boundary around that infestation, around the areas where the beetles have been caught, to help protect the areas outside where the beetles aren't present. And then we work with landowners, growers, and different people in the area to provide them a place to take their dead plants and their soil so that they can drop it off and they're not moving it to areas with new beetles. So that's kind of what the idea is behind a quarantine, protecting the resources on the outside. We do work with stakeholders and growers behind the scenes and create compliance agreements so that sometimes they can still operate, but we're making sure that things are treated and free and clear of beetles before it leaves that boundary. This boundary is also created based on known beetle catches, beetles that are caught in traps, right? Kind of one of the last things on the beetle front is really like learning how to stay connected and how to teach your neighbors and different people in Washington. We have the website agr.wa.gov/beetles. This is going to be your central hub to go to sign up for email notices, as well as to go online at any time and see where beetle catches are. So I really encourage you actually to pull out your phone right now and type in this website into your search engine. And once you get on the home screen, right, you just need to scroll down and keep scrolling until you get to what looks like this interactive map. This is your tool for getting online at any time to see where known beetle catches are in Washington. This map has the quarantine area and it has red diamonds on it that show traps that have caught beetles. So it doesn't matter where you're at in Washington, you can pull this map up. The other thing that you can do from that webpage is you can sign up to receive our beetle blasts or alerts. It's going to be on that homepage. Scroll all the way down to the very bottom to the Stay Informed section. And then you you click that Join the Pest Program email listserv. Now, you're going to make sure to want to uncheck the other boxes, or I could send you emails about other things. But I do send out a beetle blast, which is a stakeholder update, kind of once a month. I'm telling you about new detections, what our next steps are, and how you can stay involved. Aside from that, if you are ever out and about and you think you see a Japanese beetle, what should you do? Well, some of you might have said to your head, like, report, but really the first thing you need to do one thing before you make a report, and I need you to take a picture, right? Now you can upload that picture. There's an online reporting form on the website, or you can go ahead and send that in an email. Reports allow us to get out there early, find beetles before they have huge populations. Okay. So if there's any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. There is a question about what was the website again. And if you can see my screen, it's this link down at the bottom. It's agr.wa.gov/beetles, right? And it's kind of on the bottom of most of the slides. There was a question on the slide about the purple and green map when it was talking about areas of active eradication. So there's a question on this map here, because I told you that purples are areas where beetles have been established. Green is areas where beetles have not found. And then you will see orange and yellow, or sorry, brown and yellow, which meaning there's areas of being eradicated and being found, right? So the question is that they saw that there were other areas than the one that I mentioned, showing that there's an ongoing eradication, potentially in King County, in Snohomish or Thurston. and have had some lawn damage and wondering if it could be Japanese beetle. So the reason that you'll see areas on this map being lit up other than that Yakima Valley that I'm really talking about is, remember, they like to fly on airplanes. So historically in the past, we have found Japanese beetle in Washington, but it's been one beetle near the airport where we're likely to find it. We've removed that and treated. So that is the first answer to why you've been seeing, why you saw different colors on this map here in Washington. I can touch to the fact that Oregon's been actively working on a Japanese beetle eradication in and around the Portland area for a couple years now. They have really decreased their beetle numbers and they're doing a good job. Idaho had an eradication prior in Boise, and they have about 4 beetles in Caldwell and a couple in Pocatello, but they are on their way to removing those as well. So once states find them, they work pretty good to eradicate them, as well as with California and Nevada too. So the second response to your question is, if you've had some grubs and you've had some animals tearing them up and you're worried it might be Japanese beetle, you can go ahead and go out in the summer and look on your flowers, see if you've seen beetles. If you really want to, I'm not encouraging it anyway, but you can set a trap in the summer. If you catch Japanese beetles, you'll know if you have them. There might be some other resources that Washington State University Extension could offer you on other types of grubs that may be impacting you. So the next topic I'm going to talk about seems to be a favorite. And looking at this picture, can you guess what it is? So northern giant hornet. You might know it as Asian giant hornet. Most of us probably know it as murder hornet. So there was a name change, and we will now refer to it as northern giant hornet. Basically what happened is we had the invasion of the hornet, and actually Europe's been working with another invasive hornet that was referred to as the Asian hornet. So if you get to start to doing some science and some literature and research, even Googling on your own, you can see that there would be confusion between Asian giant hornet and Asian hornet. So it was just proposed to change this to potentially being Asian hornet and leave that as giant hornet so there would be less confusion. However, the ESA does decide the common names, and it was proposed and adopted to change this to northern giant hornet. So moving forward, as long as you don't, or that's what we will just refer it to. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All jokes aside, though, we don't call it murder hornet because we're worried really about it murdering us. While its stinger could really hurt, we could get a lot of venom and become sick. We're worried about it murdering honeybees. So the hornet's actually specializing in wiping out entire beehives. Throughout their entire life, they'll eat 1 or 2 individual insects, but in the fall, they could get kind of hungry, and that's when they will target and decimate all the adult bees out of the hive, and then take the brood and the pupae from the babies and take them back to feed their own. So when you're out and about, if you want to ID a hornet, there's a couple things that you can look for. The first thing that you want to do is look for its giant orange-yellow head. It's about as big and as wide as its body, whereas other insects just don't get there. It'd be like me having a pumpkin on my head. The second thing you want to look for is some uniform or some lateral lines. These are kind of going to be straight across. It's not going to have any teardrops or any spots. Another giveaway is that its thorax tends to be more black. So if we use those features and we put it side by side with the cicada killer, which is one of the things that can be close to size that gets commonly misreported, I want you to go ahead and compare the differences in the head and then the striping on it. A couple other things I want you to know about the northern giant hornet is that they are typically ground nesters, or they're going to nest in the base of trees. In Washington, that's where we found them out, was in snags of dead alders. So when they're in the trees, they're limited by the tree's cavity. However, if they've been found in the base of trees or in the ground, they can be over 2 feet wide. So here's a video you can see of the hornets coming and going. Now, the hornets really don't have any predators. However, they do like to protect their home. So this is when they get kind of gnarly. They can come out and they can cover people in swarms. This is when if people are stung multiple times, their chances of getting sick and need to go to the doctor becomes more real. I'm going to pause really quick. I have some slides out of order. Sorry, y'all, having a technical difficulty on my end, they call it. Slideshow. How do I need to get this thing out of the way? Oh, what's going on? Okay. So anyway, northern giant hornet was first found in Washington, December 2019. A resident of Blaine found a dead carcass, turned it over, and it was confirmed to be northern giant hornet. Since then, we've been working to remove hornet. We found 4 nests in the area. Last year, we had no hornets found and no nests found. And this year, we are hopefully continuing the same trend.
Cassie, we can't see your slides at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. No worries.
Let me just stop share and start share again.
Okay.
It like opened up like a, I don't know how it opened up another slide. I like moved a slide because it was in the wrong spot and then I messed everything up.
That is quite okay.
Guys, I'm not as tech savvy as I thought I was. Okay, so let's try this again.
Okay.
That was lame. All right. It's always kind of embarrassing when you have been talking for a couple minutes and people are like, your slides haven't been advancing. Oh, like I wish you would have told me. Okay. From current slide.
Okay.
And you can see just my video still.
Yes, just the
Is it
video.
playing?
It is playing, yes.
Okay, we're back on track, y'all.
Okay.
Okay, so here's a video that you can see of the hornets entering at the base of one of the trees that we removed one of the dead snacks. So my goal is to eradicate the hornets, and I know that they're living in the ground, and then they're living at the base of trees. I need to find and get rid of them. They have never been here before. How the heck am I going to do that? Because I can't like walk around the forest and just decide that's the tree they're in. Well, the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to look in the northwest corner of Whatcom County. So here's your map of Washington. That's the only place they've been found. I have it highlighted for you here. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to zoom in on the northwest corner of that county. So the black line you're going to see is the Canadian border. That's about 30 minutes south and 30 minutes as you would drive from left to right. Now, from the first time the hornet was found, it was in this area. We know that by themselves, the hornets can only fly so far. So we know that that's kind of the first area we're going to start to look. And we know that, well, in their native range, they use traps to catch the hornets. So that's the next thing we're going to do because we don't know how far they have been or how far they could expand when this first started. So what we're going to do is we're going to create bottle traps, and they use a mixture of orange juice and rice cooking wine. We're going to create entrances in the top and hang these from the tree. The idea is when the hornets fly by, it smells that scent of the bait and it's lured. Right, so we're going to be trapping up in the northwest corner of that county because that's where we know that they have been detected. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to reach out to all the residents in Washington and say, if you have the time and the resources, you can actually make this trap and look for the hornets yourself. So you can see that residents in Washington have responded. It's declined over the years, but people are still welcome. We work to catch the hornets in the traps. because eventually we want to work to catch a live hornet. So if we've caught a hornet, it's likely got some liquid on its wings or it's drowned and it's not been able to fly. We'll deploy extra traps in that area that we'll check more frequently to hopefully catch a live one. We've also got really lucky in not only working with residents to trap for hornets, we've also asked them to report sightings, which also get us in contact with catching live hornets. Once we have that hornet caught, we're going to use it, as kind of a spy to bring us back to the nest. We're going to attach a radio tag transmitter to it, feed it some jam, and let it go. Then we're going to tromp around the forest with old cable TV antennas. Just kidding. It actually uses a process of telemetry, and we're going to listen for the feedback from that tag. And eventually, hopefully, get successful to locating the nest, seeing the evidence of the hornets coming and glowing. Now, we've actually done this successfully 4 times to find all 4 nests. The first time, it took us about 2 weeks. The last time, it took about 30 minutes, so it's getting better. Once we find the nest, our goal is to go ahead and remove it. So we are going to use a modified vacuum, and we're going to stick that into the nest entrance and suck out those hornets. Once that's done, we'll go ahead and take the nest down, cut it open, remove any queen if she's present, and then freeze everything so it dies. Anytime we have a chance of live hornets to send off to research, we do, but our goal is just to remove them and keep them from moving forward. There's usually a couple hornets flying around, coming back to the nest, so we'll catch those in nets and drop them in alcohol. The good thing about those hornets is they're usually workers, so they're not queens going out to start their own nests. This video I have here for you is just to show you how hardy these hornets can be. So this is them in their kind of their vacuum cylinder they get stuck in. What happened was that we had first sucked them out of the nest, sprayed them with some carbon dioxide fire extinguishers to give them a little nap, and then put them on ice. When they had got vacuumed up, we kind of assumed that they would all be dead, but after a while and they got some heat back onto them, they warmed right up and were ready to go. So to stay up to date on this project and kind of what's going on, same thing with the beetles. There's Hornet Heralds or stakeholder updates that go to your email. These are less frequent unless there's something going on, so about every other month. That website is about the same thing, but instead of /beetles, it's gonna be /hornets. The best place to go to stay up to date. It also has an online map to show you any hornet detections currently, as well as past year's data. So after you get to the homepage, same thing, scroll down and use that click this link to join the Pest Programs listserv. If you, again, unselect the other categories unless you want to learn about them too. The most important thing, if you ever happen to see a hornet out, what do you think you should do? Report the picture, right? Try to get everyone to take pictures and send them in. Online reporting form or send them in an email. So a new one to touch on that isn't exactly a forest pest, but kind of just an update from our branch is invasive snails. We actually look for invasive snails yearly because they do have the chance to come in from ports, other waterways, and then impact agriculture. And I'll kind of detail that for you. But one of the snails that we survey for and that we look for, are vineyard snails or Stronella vigrata. And they don't really look like lots of the native snails that we have. Their shell, it's highly convex. It has about 5 to 7 convex swirls. It's kind of tannish colored with some brown lines. When you look at the shell's opening, they say it has like an internal rib that can be white or brown. So that's kind of the lip of it around as you see it opens. You can think maybe even ginger for the color. They're usually dark brown with that spiral, and they're about 10 to 20 millimeters in diameter. One of the reasons that you can tell that a snail is invasive is that they will climb and they'll be bunched up in areas where they really shouldn't be. So this is a fence post, and you can see that the snails have climbed up it. When they do this, they can be taking diseases with them in their slime, and they'll get into machinery, clog it up, and cover everything everything that's growing in their slime, and then no one will really want to eat it. One of the things we kind of worry about here in Washington is if we do have invasive snail populations pop up, we want to make sure that they aren't being transported and moved around and hitchhiking themselves, right? So they like to attach themselves to shipping containers, and then as the containers move, snails can transport with the shipping containers. Now, the good thing is that importers do examine the shipments and they enter their facilities to make sure there isn't any hitchhiking snails. And if there are exotic snails found, they're reported. By finding them early like that, it saves us tax dollars lots of money, and it reduces agricultural concerns and us spreading it across the state and to other areas. So one of the things that we do is we have actively been working in the ports here. We did a snail survey this year at the Port of Tacoma, and then we followed that with a snail treatment so that if there were any snails present, the heat would go ahead and take care of them so that the snails won't be present and be able to attach to containers and move next year. Not too much going on here for the public to do, since these snails aren't something that you would typically find in your backyard. The last thing I'm going to kind of touch about are spongy moth. Now, you might have heard of spongy moth before as gypsy moth, because in the state of Washington, we're almost to our 50th year anniversary of working to keep this out of our state. So the spongy moth adults, right, we have a female and a male moth, and they do look different. The picture up here right now is the female. It's kind of a white to a beige color. It has dark wavy lines on its wings, and its wingspan is about 2 inches. The males are slightly smaller, and they can be tan to dark brown. They also have wavy lines on their wings, and they're about 1.5 inches. The one thing that you can look for is super feathery antennas. When they're not in this adult form, right, what we're going to be looking for is egg masses. So that would be something we're going to be looking for now. And this is kind of where the spongy name comes into play, because their egg masses that you'll see on trees and things like that are very spongy. And underneath that is all the little eggs that will eventually hatch into the caterpillars. The caterpillars we'll go ahead and we'll see next in the springtime, and the caterpillars will go through different instars from small to large and eat and eat and eat till they pupate in those early summer months and then eventually hatch into those adults. And this is kind of the life cycle for the spongy moth for you. Now, when we look for the adults, right, we can look for them out in the forests, but the one thing that's really important is to look for the egg masses on trees, stones, walls, log, any lawn furniture or any outdoor item. And then we want to look for those caterpillars. When we're looking at them, they have the 5 blue and the 6 red spots. Typically, spongy moth isn't something that I do a lot of work with the public, that I harp on them. And this is why, because in the state of Washington, we set 20 to 30,000 of these traps each year to catch the spongy moths, right? And if we catch the spongy moths, then we work to remove them with the following year's plans. So right now we're still in the process of taking all our traps down, but I have a good example for you. Oops. I failed. Here, we'll just delete this. This is a good example for you of where the traps go last year. So this is from last year. You can see all the yellow dots are all the different spongy moths traps that went out, and the red stars are where the spongy moths have been caught. So we work really hard to make sure that spongy moths aren't coming in our states. And then the following year, we'll work in counties that we didn't work in the year before. Okay. So the reason that we don't want spongy moths, right, is because their caterpillars will feed on our pine needles, and they are capable of eating a lot. They'll also feed on our other trees, but once our pine needles are fed on, those trees have a lot harder chance of coming back and living, right? So this is a huge forest pest that could really harm our areas outside. This year, we've actually caught a lot of spongy moths, and you can go online to see this. We actually caught over 100 spongy moths this year. Compared to the last years, we're under 20. So what we've been doing this year is we've kind of been working in the areas where spongy moths have caught, educating people in the surrounding communities on what spongy moth is, how they can help, and then doing additional surveys to look for spongy moth. So I know that you already had a presentation on spotted lanternflies, so I'm not going to really talk on it. I don't have a lot to say since Jessica already covered it. But I do want to say, as far as like outreach and what you could be doing is kind of, if we look back to what happened when it was first discovered in 2014 in Pennsylvania, right? They saw the tree of heaven, they saw the damaged tree of heaven, then they saw the unusual insects, and they saw kind of the black sooty mold and the destruction. So as we're out and about, we always want to keep our eyes peeled for those things, as well as all those adults that we have seen, right? Thought I deleted these, sorry. So right now, what you would want to look for is you want to look for those egg masses. They lay their eggs and they cover them up in the sticky substance. As we move into the spring, right, those egg masses will hatch into those nymphs. They go from small black and white to bigger black and red and white in their instars. Those are what's crawling up and down, okay? And then we'll go into those adults that we all came to see and love. Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to harp on you about spongy moths since you've already seen it. My computer's being weird. It's a little frozen, but I am done talking at you. Please throw all your questions my way, whether that be about hornets, spotted lanternfly, Japanese beetle, snails, and spongy moth.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Let's see. Yes, please throw any questions in the Q&A for Cassie. Cassie, I have one while we're waiting for others. Regarding the spongy moth, do you have any theories, the pathway of introduction? I mean, where are you finding these in the state, and how do you think they're getting there?
In the East Coast, spongy moth lives very happily. They have lots of spongy moths. So typically what happens if we ever have spongy moth, it comes from people traveling or people moving. So they can lay their egg masses on like campers, and then those move this way, or just, you know, just generally people redistributing their lives. The other type of way they can get in is from ports. So that's kind of the two areas that we look for to keep spongy moths out. This year, if you go online to our website, you can see all the detections in that table. We've caught a lot of spongy moths in and around the Steamboat area, and a couple of moths in and around the Concrete area, as well as throughout other counties. But those are kind of the two areas with the most spongy moth detections so far.
Thank you. All right, let's see. So we have a question. What is the Department of Agriculture and the Washington Invasive Species Council take on the jumping worm introductions? Is there cause for concern about the species affecting urban and non-urban forest ecosystems?
I am currently not working on the jumping worm. The last discussion I heard is they were looking to see if there was somebody at Extension who was more well-versed in worms. And Maria, maybe you know if that's been answered.
Yeah, I think that's the jumping worm is not a council priority, but I know that Todd Murray, who is the vice chair for the council, might have some more information on that. I believe it is in the area of Washington State University Extension. So definitely would encourage you to reach out to your local extension office, and they should hopefully be able to direct you to the right person within extension.
Yeah, always feel free to. You can shoot me that same question via email, and we can work to find somebody who's maybe up to speed to talking to you about it. Unfortunately, I'm not the best contact at this time, but we can figure it out.
Okay.
There
There
is
might be a couple oh, sorry.
yeah, there's one in the chat about wondering if there's any updates on the quagga mussel that was over here in Idaho.
Yeah, so I believe they just last week finished their eradication treatment